In this video series, we're going to be going through all the chapters of A Storm of Swords, A Feast for Crows, and A Dance with Dragons in vertical footage, since there is no graphic novel for us to make an animated comic book. In the previous video, we covered the first 13 chapters of A Storm of Swords, and in this video, we will now cover chapters 14 to 27. If you haven't seen the previous video, we suggest watching that first and then coming back to this video. We will also be using character icons throughout the video to help showcase who is being talked about throughout the chapters. Anyway, let's continue. A Storm of Swords, Chapter 14. Catelyn II. Catelyn realizes it's Robb as soon as she hears the cages burst into noise. Robb has made his way back to Riverrun with Greywind. Catelyn expects that, unlike Edmure, who hasn't revisited and spends his time with Mark Piper and Patrick Mallister, Robb will visit her. Hoster Tully's health has deteriorated rapidly, his lucidity fading as he calls for Tansy, seeking forgiveness. Sir Desmond continues to restrict her access around the castle. The only slight relief to her gloom was the return of Sir Robin Ryger and his men. According to Maester Vyman, they had apparently been forced to walk back after Jaime Lannister cleverly sank their galley and fled. Catelyn wished to discuss the events with Sir Robin, yet her request to speak with him was also denied. Shortly after arguing with her brother on the day he came back, Catelyn heard loud voices from below. From the roof, she observes groups of soldiers by the main gate, horses being readied for departure, and one of Robb's banners on the ground. Amidst indistinct shouts, several knights trampled on the banners as they rode out. Recognizing them as men who fought under Edmure at the fords, Catelyn wondered if her brother had somehow offended them. She thought she spotted Sir Perwyn Frey and Martin Rivers among the riders, but from her vantage point, it was hard to be sure. Nearly 40 men rode out, their intentions a mystery. Those men didn't return, and the Maester refused to reveal their identities, destinations, or reason for their anger. He suggested that her brother, the soon-to-be Lord of Riverrun, would inform her of what she needed to know. Now that Robb has triumphantly returned from the west, Catelyn reassures herself that he will forgive her, as he is her son, and Arya and Sansa are as much as his family as hers. She anticipates that he will release her from confinement. As she prepares for the meeting, having bathed and dressed, Sir Desmond arrives to inform her that King Robb commands her presence in the Great Hall. This summons brings both hope and dread. Soon she will discover if she's lost 2 or 3 sons. As Catelyn walks into the crowded room, all eyes are drawn to the dais. She recognizes the familiar backs of key figures: Lady Mormont in patched ringmail, the towering Greatjon with his son, Lord Jason Mallister clutching his winged helm, and Titus Blackwood wrapped in a raven-feathered cloak. She senses a divide among the onlookers, some potentially hostile, others merely indifferent. Catelyn also feels the unsettling absence of someone, though she can't immediately identify who is missing. On the dais stands Robb. Catelyn realizes that he is now a man grown at 16. The war has hardened his features, his armor shows signs of wear. He wears the sword crown made of bronze and iron, now sitting more comfortably on his head. Edmure is positioned beneath the bustling dais. Robb declares that the bravery shown at Stone Mill will be forever remembered, joking that this is why Lord Tywin chose to confront Stannis instead. The crowd reacts with laughter and cheers, cautioning that further challenges from the Lannisters lie ahead. The Greatjon's shout of King in the North and his raised fist prompt the Riverlords to respond with the King of the Trident, filling the hall with thunderous applause and stomping. Catelyn finds comfort in seeing Sir Brendan Tully among the celebrants. An unfamiliar boy appears to be Robb's squire, and nearby stands a young knight in a seashell-adorned surcoat and an older knight with a saffron bend marked by black pepper pots. Between them are an elegant woman and a younger female, likely her daughter, along with another girl about Sansa's age. Catelyn recognizes the seashells as the emblem of a minor house, but the older man's symbol is unfamiliar. She is puzzled by their presence. Euthyderis Wayne strikes his staff on the floor as Sir Desmond guides Catelyn toward the dais. She worries about how Robb might look at her, fearing the same coldness she saw in Edmure. However, as she approaches, it isn't anger she detects in Robb's eye, but possibly apprehension. She dismisses the thought, knowing there is nothing for him to fear in her. Her uncle, Sir Brendan, is the first to welcome Catelyn. Robb confirms he was wounded by an arrow while attacking the crag, but reassures her it has healed well due to excellent care. Catelyn then steels herself to address the consequences of her actions. He acknowledges her motive was to save his sisters. As they discuss, Lord Rickard Karstark angrily interrupts, accusing Catelyn of denying him vengeance for his sons. Catelyn argues that keeping Jaime Lannister alive might save her children, whereas his death wouldn't have resurrected Lord Karstark's. Lord Karstark remains unconvinced, dismissing Catelyn's explanation as foolish and claiming his sons deserved better. The Great Jon attempts to defuse the situation by attributing her actions to maternal instinct, but Karstark rebuffs this, accusing her of treason. Robb firmly defends his mother, stating that no one should call her a traitor. He shares his realization that love, though sometimes unwise, leads people in compelling ways, and asserts that one should always follow their heart. The confrontation ends with Lord Karstark leaving the hall. Robb doesn't intervene and says that he needs to have a discussion with her and his uncles. Euthyderis Wayne bangs his staff and announces the dismissal, prompting both River Lords and Northerners to head for the doors. It's only then that Catelyn notices something wrong. Greywind is missing. Lady Mormont reassures her, saying she would have acted the same if her daughters were in Cersei Lannister's hands. The Great Jon, ignoring formalities, lifts her in a bear hug, confident that Robb will take down Jaime Lannister again if necessary. Galabart Glover and Lord Jason Mallister approach with cooler tones, and Jonas Bracken is distant, though still polite. Her brother comes last, expressing his prayers for her daughters, which Catelyn warmly acknowledges. After the well-wishers leave, only Robb, the Tullys, and 6 unfamiliar individuals remain in the hall, prompting Catelyn to ask if they are newly aligned with Robb's cause. The younger knight, marked by seashells on his armor, introduces himself as new to the cause but emphasizes their loyalty and courage. Robb, looking uneasy, introduces Lady Sibel, the wife of Lord Gorwyn Westerling, a captive from the Whispering Wood. Catelyn recalls that the Westerlings are a minor house sworn to the Lannisters. Robb then introduces Sir Rolf Spicer, Lady Sibel's brother, who served as castellan when the crag was taken. He proceeds to present their children, Sir Reynold Westerling, Eleanor, and Rolam, his squire, who attempts to kneel before opting to bow. Catelyn responds that the honor is hers, wondering if Robb had managed to secure the crag's loyalty. If so, it explained why the Westerlings were now with him, as Castle Rock was not known to forgive such betrayals lightly, especially under Tywin Lannister's leadership. The final figure to step forward is a shy young woman. Robb takes her hand and introduces her as Lady Jean Westerling, Lord Gorwyn's eldest daughter, and hesitantly reveals her as his wife. Catelyn's first reaction is disbelief, thinking Robb is too young, followed by the reminder that he had promised himself to someone else. Then she recalls the idea of foolish acts committed out of love and realizes that Robb has caught her off guard, leaving her no choice but to forgive him. Despite her frustration, she feels a reluctant admiration for how carefully the moment had been arranged, worthy of a skilled actor, or perhaps a ruler. Catelyn, seeking no alternative, takes Jean Westerling's hands and declares her a new daughter. She kisses the anxious girl on each cheek, welcoming her to their home. Jean responds with a vow to be a loyal and devoted wife to Robb and the best queen she can be. Catelyn mentally notes that Jean, though young and no doubt beautiful, is now a queen. Observing the girl's chestnut curls and wide hips, she thinks at least Jean should have no difficulties giving birth. Lady Sybelle steps in, taking Catelyn's hand before more could be said. She expresses her gratitude for joining House Stark, but mentions that they are all quite tired from the journey, suggesting they retire to their rooms. She leaves Catelyn to spend time with her son. Robb agrees and kisses Jean, telling her that the steward will arrange proper lodgings. Sir Edmure Tully offers to escort them, which Lady Sybelle appreciates. Young Roland wonders if he should stay, but Robb, amused, assures him that a squire isn't required right now. Sir Reynold then interjects, jokingly mentioning that Robb has gotten by for years without him and can certainly endure a few more hours. Taking hold of Roland's arms, he leads his younger sibling out of the hall. Once they were far enough away, Catelyn comments on how lovely Robb's wife is and notes that the Westerlings appear respectable, although she reminds Robb that Lord Gawain serves Tywin Lannister. Robb agrees, explaining that Jason Mallister seized Lord Gawain at the Whispering Wood and has been keeping him at Seaguard in return for a ransom. Robb plans to release him, though he admits their marriage, made without his consent, has placed Lord Gawain in danger. He fears Jean may lose everything for loving him, as the crag is not a formidable keep. Catelyn quietly remarks that Robb has lost the phrase. His expression reveals the truth, and now she understands why Perwyn Frey and Martin Rivers had departed in anger, even stomping Robb's banner as they left. She then asks how many men came with his new wife. Robb answers in a somber tone, saying they have 50 soldiers, including a dozen knights. Catelyn contrasts this with the 4,000 Lord Walder Frey had sent with Robb. Robb adds that Jean is not only beautiful, but also intelligent with a kind heart. Catelyn, troubled by his action, thinks to herself that Robb needs warriors, not kindness, and wonders how he could be so impulsive and youthful. Instead, she calmly asks how it all happened. Robb, smiling, explains that he captured Jean's home, and in return, she captured his heart. He describes how they stormed the crag at night with Black Walder and the Small John leading the assault while he broke through the main gate. After being hit by an arrow, Jean nursed him back to health in her own room. She was by his side when news of Bran and Rickon's fate reached him, and she comforted him that night. Catelyn realizes what kind of comfort Jean had offered her son and remarks that he married her the next day. Robb looks at her, torn between pride and sorrow, saying it was the only honorable thing to do. Though he believes Jean will be a good wife, Catelyn knows this won't soothe Lord Frey. Robb admits he's made mistakes, regretting not heeding Catelyn's advice about keeping Theon as a hostage, believing Bran and Rickon would still be safe had he done so. She gently reminds him that Lord Baelon may still have attacked, as he previously lost 2 sons in his quest for a crown, and may have seen it as a fair trade to lose just one this time. She then asks about the Freys, and Robb reveals that Sir Steffron's death left him with less cooperative heirs, especially Black Walder, who suggested his Frey sisters would gladly marry a widower. Jean had to plead for mercy to stop Robb from killing him on the spot. Catelyn informs Robb that he has severely insulted House Frey. Robb responds that this wasn't his goal, explaining that Sir Steffron lost his life for him and that Oliver had been as devoted a squire as any ruler could hope for. Oliver had asked to remain with him, but Sir Ryman Frey took him and the rest of their troops back to the twins. The Greatjon had advised Robb to fight them, but Catelyn remarks that battling his own men while surrounded by enemies would have been disastrous. Robb agrees and suggests new marriages for Lord Walder's daughter, noting Sir Wendell Manderly's offer and the Greatjon's uncle's interest. He hopes Lord Walder will be reasonable, but Catelyn disagrees, reminding him that Walder is proud and expected to be a grandfather to a king. She warns that offering 2 old men and the son of an unimportant lord won't appease him, and that Robb's broken oath has insulted the twins by marrying into a lesser house. Robb, bristling, defends the Westerling's noble bloodline, but Catelyn points out that this only deepens Walder Frey's anger, as he's always resented the disdain of older houses. She recalls other slights Lord Walder had suffered, including Jon Arryn's refusal to foster his grandsons and her father's rejection of a marriage proposal for Edmure. Before the conversation can continue, Brendan Blackfish suggests they move to a more private location. Robb agrees, weary, and as they ascend the steps, Catelyn inquires about Greywind. Robb reveals that his direwolf is in the yard, as Jean and her mother are uneasy around him. Catelyn suspects the real issue lies in their fear of Robb's connection to his wolf. Robb, however, insists that Greywind has become too dangerous, having killed many men in battle, including a knight Jean knew well. Greywind shows dislike for her uncle as well, baring his teeth whenever Sir Rolf approaches him. Catelyn, disturbed, advises Robb to send Sir Rolf away, recalling her earlier warning about Theon Greyjoy. She warns that anyone Greywind distrusts should not be allowed near Robb. She reminds him that these direwolves are more than ordinary animals, believing the gods sent them to the Starks. She points out that there were 5 pups for the 5 Stark children. Robb corrects her, reminding her that Jon had a wolf as well. He recalls finding them and once thinking, like Catelyn, that the wolves were meant to protect them. His expression hardens as he mentions how that belief changed when he learned Theon had killed Bran and Rickon. Skeptical but willing to calm his mother's worries, he agrees to find a task for Rolf that will send him elsewhere. Catelyn, relieved, kisses Robb gently on the cheek. At Lord Hoster's personal audience room, a cozy space situated just over the Great Hall, is ideal for secretive discussions. Robb sits in the main chair and removes his crown. Meanwhile, Edmure enthusiastically recounts the battle at the stone mill to his uncle. Once the servants leave, the Blackfish interrupts, saying, "I think we've all heard sufficient of your boasting, nephew." Edmure was taken aback. "Boasting? What do you mean?" "I mean," said the Blackfish, "that you owe his grace your thanks for his forbearance. He played out that murmur's farce in the Great Hall as to not shame you before your own people. Had it been me, I would have flayed you for your stupidity rather than praising this folly of the Fords." "Good men died to defend those Fords, uncle." Edmure sounded outraged. "What, is no one to win victories but the young wolf? Did I steal some glory meant for you, Robb?" "Your grace," Robb corrected. "I see. You took me for your king, uncle, or have you forgotten that as well?" The Blackfish said, "You were commanded to hold Riverrun, Edmure, no more." "And I bloodied Lord Tywin's nose." "So you did," said Robb, "but a bloody nose won't win the war, will it? Did you ever think to ask yourself why we remained in the West so long after Oxcross? You knew I did not have enough men to threaten Lannisport or Castle Rock. Why, there were other castles. Gold, cattle. You think we stayed for plunder?" Robb was incredulous. "Uncle, I wanted Lord Tywin to come west." "We were all horsed," Sir Brendan said. "The Lannister host was mainly foot. We planned to run Lord Tywin a merry chase up and down the coast, then slip behind him to take up a strong defensive position athwart the Gold Road, at a place my scouts had found where the ground would have been greatly in our favor. If he had come at us there, he would have paid a grievous price. But if he did not attack, he would have been trapped in the west, 1,000 leagues from where he needed to be. All the while, we would have lived off his land instead of him living off ours." "Lord Stannis was about to fall upon King's Landing," Robb said. "He might have rid us of Joffrey, the Queen, and the Imp in one stroke. Then we might have been able to make a peace." Edmure looked from uncle to nephew. "You never told me." "I told you to hold Riverrun," said Robb. "What part of that command did you fail to comprehend?" "When you stopped Lord Tywin on the Red Fork," said the Blackfish, "you delayed him just long enough for riders out of Bitterbridge to reach him with word of what was happening to the east. Lord Tywin turned his host at once, joined up with Mathewis Rowan and Rendell Tarley near the headwaters of the Blackwater, and made a forced march to Tumble's Fall, where he found Mace Tyrell and 2 of his sons waiting with a huge host and a fleet of barges. They floated down the river, disembarked half a day's ride from the city, and took Stannis in the rear. Catelyn remembered King Renly's court, as she had seen it at Bitterbridge, 1,000 golden roses steaming in the wind, Queen Marjorie's shy smile and soft words, her brother the Knight of Flowers. If you had to fall into a woman's arms, my son, why couldn't they have been Marjorie Tyrell's? The wealth and power of Highgarden could have made all the difference in the fighting yet to come, and perhaps Grey Wind would have liked the smell of her as well. Edmure looked ill. I never meant. Never, Robb. You must let me make amends. I will lead the van in the next battle. For amends, brother, or for glory? Catelyn wondered. The next battle, Robb said. Well, that will be soon enough. Once Joffrey is wed, the Lannisters will take the field against me once more, I don't doubt, and this time the Tyrells will march beside them. And I may need to fight the Freys as well, if Black Walder has his way. So long as Theon Greyjoy sits in your father's seat with your brother's blood on his hands, these other foes must wait, Catelyn told her son. Your first duty is to defend your own people, win back Winterfell, and hang Theon in a crow's cage to die slowly. Or else put off that crown for good, Robb, for men will know that you are no true king at all. From the way Robb looked at her, she could tell that it had been a long while since anyone had dared speak to him so bluntly. When they told me Winterfell had fallen, I wanted to go north at once, he said, with a hint of defensiveness. I wanted to free Bran and Rickon, but I never dreamed that Theon could harm them, truly. If I had... It is too late for ifs and too late for rescues, Catelyn said. All that remains is vengeance. The last word we had from the north, Sir Roderick had defeated a force of Iron Men near Torrhen Square and was assembling a host at Castle Serwyn to retake Winterfell, said Robb. By now, he may have done it. There has been no news for a long while, and what of the Trident if I turn north? I can't ask the River Lords to abandon their own people. No, said Catelyn. Leave them to guard their own and win back the north with Northmen. How will you get the Northmen to the north? Her brother Edmure asked. The Iron Men control the Sunset Sea. The Greyjoys hold Moat Catelyn as well. No army has ever taken Moat Catelyn from the south. Even to march against it is madness. We could be trapped on the causeway with the Ironborn before us and angry Freys at our backs. We must win back the Freys, said Robb. With them, we still have some chance of success, however small. Without them, I see no hope. I am willing to give Lord Walder whatever he requires. Apologies, honors, lands, gold. There must be something that would soothe his pride. Not something, said Catelyn. Someone. A Storm of Swords, Chapter 15. Jon II. Tormund asked Jon if they are big enough for them. The giants sway while riding the mammoths, passing by in pairs. Jon's horse becomes skittish, unsure if he's more unsettled by the mammoths or their massive riders. Even Ghost, normally fearless, retreats slightly, baring his teeth at the sight of the creatures far larger than him. Jon steadies his horse, trying to count the giants emerging from the snowy mists along the Milkwater. He counted over 50 when Tormund distracts him and he realizes there are hundreds, seemingly an endless stream of them. The giants Jon sees are nothing like those from old Nan's stories. These creatures resemble bears more than humans, covered in thick fur like the mammoths they ride. Their height is hard to gauge, but Jon estimates them at 10 to 14 feet tall. Their upper bodies are somewhat human, but their long arms hang too low and their lower halves are much broader. Their thick legs seem short compared to their arms with wide black feet. They constantly sniff the air, relying more on scent than sight. Jon recalls the legend of Jormungand, who blew the horn of winter, awakening the giants from the depths of the earth. He notes that instead of the expected grand swords, the giants wield crude clubs fashioned from dead tree limbs. One of the approaching giants appear older than the others. His pelt a mix of grey and white. Tormund yells up to him in a language Jon doesn't understand, his words ringing harshly. The giant's mouth opens wide, showing huge square teeth, and he emits a sound, which Jon soon realizes is laughter. The giant responds in the same rough language that Tormund has spoken. Jon questions if the giant they encountered was their king. Tormund clarifies that giants don't have kings any more than wild animals do. He introduces the giant as Mag Ma Dun Do Weg, or Mag the Mighty, and humorously remarks that Jon can kneel to him if he likes, since Jon's knees might be itching for a king to bow to. He also warns Jon to be cautious as giants have poor eyesight and might accidentally step on him. Curious about Tormund's earlier conversation with the giant, Jon learns that they exchanged jokes in the old tongue. Tormund humorously comments on the resemblance between the giant and his mammoth, prompting the giant to jest that Jon might be Tormund's beardless daughter. Riding back, Jon asks Tormund about a rumor that he killed a giant. Tormund recounts a fantastical tale of surviving during a fierce winter storm in his youth. He describes how he sought refuge inside a sleeping giant by cutting open her belly to stay warm. However, when the giant woke up, she mistook him for her offspring and nursed him. Jon questions how she could wake up if he killed her, prompting Tormund to admit he never actually killed her. He confesses that he prefers his renowned title, Tormund Giantsbane, over the less heroic-sounding Tormund Giant's Babe. Jon shifts the conversation to Tormund's various nicknames, particularly curious about Hornblower, though he hesitates to ask directly. Instead, he quietly wonders to himself if Mance Rayder found Jormungand's horn and whether it played a role in the appearance of the giants and mammoths they've encountered. Tormund, amused, dives into a wild tale about sleeping with a bear. Tormund then turns the conversation toward Jon, teasing him about the Night's Watch and their supposed practice of castration, implying that Jon's refusal of Ygritte's advances might stem from more than just his vows. Jon, feeling embarrassed, avoids Tormund's gaze by focusing on the falling snow, aware that Ygritte's obvious feelings for him have not gone unnoticed by others. Jon spends the majority of his time alongside Ygritte, both during daylight and nightfall. Mance Rayder, noticing Rattleshirt's distrust of Jon, advises that he travel with Tormund Giantsbane instead. Jon eagerly complies, and the following morning, Ygritte and Longspear Rick abandon Rattleshirt's group to join Tormund's. Ygritte explains that the free folk journey with whoever they prefer, and she had grown weary of Rattleshirt. Nightly, Ygritte places her sleeping furs beside Jon's, regardless of where he positions himself, near or far from the flames. One evening, Jon awakens to find her curled against him with her arm resting over his torso. He lies there for some time, listening to her quiet breaths, attempting to disregard the tension in his body. While it's typical for rangers to share furs for warmth, Jon suspects that Ygritte desires more than just heat. To avoid the situation, he starts relying on ghosts to keep her at a distance, recalling old Nan's tales of knights who slept with weapons between themselves and their ladies. In Jon's case, it's a direwolf that replaces the blade. Even with these precautions, Ygritte continues to press. 2 days ago, after Jon expressed a desire for hot water for a bath, Ygritte quickly countered, advocating for the briskness of cold water if there's someone to warm up with afterward. She challenged him to join her in the river, only partially frozen. Jon half-jokingly declined, citing the discomfort of riding all day in frozen clothes. Ygritte playfully chided him, reminding him that bathing didn't involve clothes and hinting he knew nothing. Jon firmly refused again, conveniently using Tormund Thunderfist Call as his excuse to leave. Ygritte's red hair, a scarce feature among the free folk, earned her admiration for its supposed good luck, often referred to as being kissed by fire. In the eyes of a noble court, the woman would have been seen as quite ordinary. She had a round common face, a stubby nose, and her teeth were slightly misaligned. Her eyes, set too widely apart, were also noted by Jon the first time they met, his dagger at her throat. However, lately he's begun to see her differently. Her smile makes her crooked teeth less noticeable, and her wide-set eyes, a lively blue-grey, suddenly don't seem like a flaw. Sometimes her husky singing voice moved him, and other times, sitting by the fire, her knees drawn up, red hair illuminated by the flames, just smiling at him, those moments stirred something deeper within him too. Jon reminded himself that he was a sworn brother of the Night's Watch, bound by an oath he had made. He had pledged to take no wife, claim no lands, and father no children, speaking those words in front of the weirwood and before the gods of his father. As they move past a group of 20 more mammoths, Tormund probes Jon about his feelings for Ygritte. Jon falters, struggling to articulate, and claims he is too young to marry. Tormund chuckles, dismissing the idea. Jon says he recognizes Ygritte's pivotal role in saving him from Rattleshirt, which compels him to ensure he doesn't dishonor her. Tormund counters, pointing out that they are both free, and there is no dishonor in their union. Jon expresses concern about potentially fathering a child. Tormund welcomed the idea of a child kissed by fire, dismissing Jon's worry about the child being a bastard. He reminds Jon of his own bastard status and mentions that Ygritte could prevent pregnancy with Moon Tea if she chooses. Jon firmly states that he will not father a bastard, leading Tormund to question why Jon would steal Ygritte if he has no intentions towards her. Jon, confused, asks what Tormund means by stealing. Tormund explains that Jon killed the 2 men with her and took her away, which amounts to stealing in his view. Jon insists he has taken her as a prisoner, not as a romantic conquest. Tormund, half joking, wonders if Jon has been castrated, given his lack of interest, humorously cautioning about the dangers of his unused member shrinking more and more until it disappears. Jon finds himself without a response. It's hardly surprising that the 7 kingdoms view the free folk as barely human. They lack laws, honor, and even basic decency, constantly stealing from one another, breeding indiscriminately, favoring assault over marriage, and flooding the world with illegitimate children. Yet, despite this, Jon is becoming attached to Tormund Giantsbane, a boastful and deceitful man. He feels a familiar fondness for Longspear and Ygritte, but he resolves not to think about Ygritte. Tormund and Longspear traveled with a varied group of wildlings. Among them are menacing types like Rattleshirt and the Weeper. Harma Dogshead executes a dog every 2 weeks to adorn her standard. Styr, Magna of Fen, though earless, is venerated by his tribe as more deity than leader. Varamir's Sixskins, a diminutive figure, rides a formidable white snow bear that looms 13 feet when it rises. This fearsome bear, accompanied by 3 wolves and a shadowcat, follow Varamir everywhere. Jon's sole encounter with Varamir left him as uneasy with the tension between Ghost and the bear and the shadowcat. There are even more free folk hailing from the Frostfangs. Jon sees the men of the frozen shore who ride chariots crafted from the walrus skeletons drawn by the groups of ferocious dogs. He also knows of the dreaded Ice River clans rumored to consume human flesh, and the cave dwellers who painted their faces in hues of blue, purple, and green. He personally witnesses the Hornfoot men marching barefoot with soles as tough as boiled leather. While Jon hasn't encountered any mythical snarks or grumpkins, he wouldn't be surprised if Tormund invited some to dinner. Jon estimates that many in the wildling host have never seen the Wall, with a significant number not knowing the common tongue. However, this proves inconsequential. Mance Rayder adeptly uses the Old Tongue, captivating the evenings with his lute, weaving mysterious and wild tunes into the night air. This could be like Euron using his horn to make himself king. Mance Rayder has dedicated years to crafting this immense, slow-moving host. He engaged with clan mothers and magnas, persuading one village with diplomacy, enchanting another with a song, and compelling a third through force. He brokered peace and unified these disparate factions into a single formidable force directed at the Seven Kingdoms. Though lacking traditional royal symbols and not dressed as such, Jon sees clearly that Mance Rayder is a king in more than just title. Following Qhorin Halfhand's orders, Jon was to ride, eat, and fight alongside them, but despite his careful surveillance, he learns little. The Halfhand had suspected that the wildlings had ventured into the harsh, desolate Frostfangs in search of some weapon or mystical power capable of breaching the wall. Yet, if such a discovery had been made, it remains a secret. Mance also keeps his strategies to himself, and since their initial meeting, Jon had only seen Mance from afar. Jon contemplates the possibility of having to kill someone he respects, a thought that brings him no pleasure. The wildling host advances slowly, encumbered by their herds, children, and modest possessions, with the snow further hindering their movement. Their pace resembles honey oozing on a chilly winter morning as they follow the Milkwater's course deep into the haunted forest. Not far ahead, Jon is aware that the Fist of the First Men rises above the trees, housing 300 armed and mounted brothers of the Night's Watch, all prepared for what comes next. The old bear had deployed scouts other than the Halfhand. Jon is certain that Jarman Buckwell or Thorian Smallwood would have returned by now with news of the wildlings' movement from the mountains. Jon reflects that Mormont will choose to fight rather than retreat. He is too seasoned and has ventured too far to back down now. He'll challenge the wildlings regardless of their overwhelming numbers. Soon, Jon anticipates the blare of war horns and the sight of a column of riders descending upon them with black cloaks billowing and swords drawn. Although 300 men cannot realistically defeat 30,000, Jon knows they don't need to. Eliminating just Mance, who unites the wildlings, could be sufficient. Upon spotting Jon, Ygritte challenges him, asking if he now believes her tales of giants riding mammoths. Before Jon can respond, Tormund interjects with a laugh, teasing that Jon is smitten and wants to wed one. Longspear Reich, surprised, asks if Jon wants to marry a giantess, and Tormund corrects him with a bellowing laugh, claiming Jon aims to marry a mammoth. As Jon slows his horse to a walk, Ygritte stays close beside him. She claims to be 3 years his senior, although she's shorter than he is. Ygritte reminds Jon of Arya, although he knows Arya is younger and likely thinner. Wrapped in layers of furs and skin, he has trouble discerning Ygritte's actual build. As they move through the snow, Ygritte asks Jon if he knows the song The Last of the Giants, and before he can answer, Ygritte starts singing it. Hearing her, Tormund sings along, which in turn makes Longspear and Tormund's children join in as well. Eventually, all the wildlings are singing along. The song laments the decline of the giants, depicting them as ancient rulers of the world now driven to near extinction by the encroachments of men. The lyrics express a deep sense of loss and isolation, recounting how humans have overtaken the giants' lands, destroying their natural habitats, and hunted them relentlessly. The chorus evokes a poignant farewell to the giants' era, hinting that their disappearance will leave a profound silence in the world. Ygritte is visibly moved to tears by the song's end. During a tense moment, Jon questions why Ygritte is crying over a song, remarking that he has seen many giants alive. Ygritte, frustrated, retorts sharply before Jon is suddenly attacked by an eagle. The bird assaults him with its talons, causing severe pain and clinging to his face. In the ensuing chaos, Jon loses his balance and falls from the horse. When he regains consciousness, he finds himself on the ground with Ygritte protectively kneeling over him, dagger in hand. Though the eagle has flown away, Jon fears for his eye. However, Ygritte reassures him that the injury is superficial, just some torn skin. Tormund threatens anyone who dares approach Jon, prompting a threat from Rattleshirt, telling them to move out of the way or Mance will be informed of their insubordination. Ygritte, alarmed, questions whether Mance has specifically demanded Jon. confirmations lead Tormund to urge Jon to comply with the summon. Jon agrees to come. Feeling dizzy, he resolves to seek medical attention later, wanting to see the king beyond the wall first. Ygritte, fiercely determined, declared she is joining him. Their ride is harsh and unforgiving. Despite the severe weather, the distinct shape of the fist of the first men is visible through the snow. Jon listens for signs of battle from the old bear, but hears only the soft crunch of snow under their horses' hooves. They approach the southern slope, the easiest route up the hill. At its base, Jon finds a deceased horse, partially covered in snow, its entrails spilling out. Initially, he suspects wolves, but the uneaten carcass suggests otherwise. More dead horses dot the slope, their bodies pillaged by wildlings who strip them of gear and chop them up for resources. Rattleshirt directs Jon upwards, indicating that Mance is at the summit. They dismount outside the ring wall and navigate through a narrow gap in the stones. On entry, they encounter a gruesome sight. The Night's Watch has been slaughtered. Jon ponders the whereabouts and fate of Sam. On the camp's far side, Jon and the others find Mance's radar. Accompanying Mance are Jarl, Harmer Dogshead, Styr, and Varamir Sixskins with his beasts. Mance gives Jon Snow a stern look and inquires about the injuries on his face. Ygritte quickly attributes the damage to Orell's assault. However, Mance, skeptical of Jon's truthfulness, coldly suggests that Jon might deserve to lose his tongue to prevent further deceit. Styr the Magna then unsheaths a long knife, implying that Jon might find clarity in losing an eye. Mance tests Jon further, challenging him to disclose the number of his brothers and urging him to speak honestly this time. Struggling, Jon recalls Qhorin Halfhand's advice not to hesitate, regardless of the question. He reveals that 300 of his brothers were present. Mance corrects Jon's slip of saying us instead of them, highlighting Jon's conflicted loyalties. Jon repeats his answer, informing Mance the truth that there were 300 brothers, 100 from the Shadow Tower and 200 from Castle Black. The Wildling King probes deeper, demanding to know who commanded the Night's Watch at this location. Ygritte prompts Jon to omit the identity of the deceased leader, sensing his hesitation. Jon's internal struggle identifies as he contemplates his role as a double agent. He finally reveals that the commander was the Old Bear. Harmer Dogshead expresses skepticism at Jon's claim. She then questions who now holds command at Castle Black. Jon swiftly names Bowen Marsh. Man laughs off the news, mocking Bowen's lack of real battle skills while noting his ability to manage resources. Jon explains that the Old Bear had fortified the position well, preparing defenses and provisions against an assault. Mance interrupts, acknowledging that Jorah Mormont had indeed prepared for him specifically. He reflects that a direct attack would have been costly, but then shifts the conversation to a greater threat: the undead. Mance states that traditional defenses are ineffective against the Whites. He then orders Varamir to scout for undead with his wolves, instructs the Lord of Bones to double all the patrols and ensure each man is equipped with a torch and flint, and tells Styr and Jarl to prepare for an early departure. In a tense moment, Rattleshirt expresses a desire for retribution against Jon, but Ygritte intervenes, arguing that Jon cannot be blamed for lying to protect his former comrades. Ygritte saves Jon by saying that she and Jon have shared many nights together to prove he is a wildling, lightening the mood momentarily with laughter from the onlookers. Mance then probes subtly about Jon's relationship with Ygritte, to which Jon, feeling morally lost and seeking forgiveness from his late father, confesses their bond. Mance approves of Jon's honesty and decides that he and Ygritte will join Jarl and Styr on a mission the following day. When Jon inquires about their destination, Mance reveals they are to go beyond the wall, challenging Jon to prove his loyalty through actions. Then Magna of Then questions why he should take a Night's Watch deserter with them. Mance firmly responds that Jon's intimate knowledge of the Watch and the Wall make him an invaluable asset, implying that not using Jon's expertise would be foolish. Tensions escalate when Styr questions Jon Snow's loyalty. Mance Rayder, unfazed, responds that Styr can kill Jon if he is disloyal. He then orders Rattleshirt to keep moving toward the wall, highlighting the importance of outpacing Mormont. This is their best opportunity to attack the wall. Mance departs with Harmid Dogshead and Varamir Sixskins. Jon and Ygritte are left with Jarl, Rattleshirt, and the Magna of Them. As Jarl instructs Jon to prepare for an early departure, Rattleshirt and the Magna watch Jon with barely hidden hostility. Rattleshirt warns Ygritte against lying. Jon, feeling threatened, draws his blade, Longclaw, and warns Rattleshirt, invoking the fate of Corran Halfhand. Rattleshirt counters, taunting Jon about the absence of his direwolf. Ygritte challenges Rattleshirt's assumption with a laugh. At that moment, Ghost, Jon's direwolf, appears atop the ring wall, his presence menacing and silent, his red eyes glaring ominously. This intimidating display causes Rattleshirt to withdraw, retreating with a parting curse. As Jon and Ygritte make their way down the Fist of the First Men, Ghost walks alongside their horses. Only when they reach the midpoint of the Milkwater does Jon feel secure enough to address Ygritte about her earlier statements. He tells her that he never asked her to lie for him. Ygritte clarifies that she didn't lie, but merely omitted certain details. She had claimed they shared intimate moments under his cloak, but she hadn't specified when these moments began. Her smile is shy as she suggests Jon find a new sleeping spot for Ghost that night, echoing Mance's philosophy that actions speak louder than words. A Storm of Swords, Chapter 16. Sansa II. Sansa is being given a beautiful new silk gown by an old woman who says the queen commanded it herself. Confused, Sansa asks which queen, Margaery the Queen of Thorns or Cersei. The woman clarifies that it's the Queen Regent, who has now been her customer for many years. Cersei has stated that Sansa, now a young woman, should no longer dress like a child. The woman remarks that Sansa's figure will be as attractive as the Queen's as she measures her chest, suggesting that she should not conceal it. Sansa feels a mix of embarrassment and discomfort, recalling a recent incident where she couldn't fully lace her jerkin, catching the stable boy and some grown men staring at her developing figure. Her clothes have become uncomfortably tight. The seamstress reveals that these outfits are meant for the king's wedding. Once alone, Sansa's thoughts turn to suspicion, pondering the true motivation behind this unexpected favor, suspecting Margaery or her grandmother's influence in the gesture. Margaery's unwavering kindness and the warm reception from Margaery's lady significantly brighten Sansa's days. Lady Lynette offers her music lessons, Lady Jana shares intriguing gossip, Mary Crane always has a funny tale, and little Lady Bolwer reminds Sansa of her sister Arya, albeit less intense. Sansa becomes particularly close to the Tyrell cousins, Eleanor, Alla, and Megha, who are closer to her age. Eleanor, witty and slender, jokingly refers to themselves as roses from lower on the bush, due to their branch of the family, while Megha is cheerful and boisterous, and Alla is reserved and attractive. Sansa quickly becomes part of the cousins group, treating her like an old friend. They spend afternoons doing embroidery, savoring sweet cakes and wine, and evenings playing games and singing in the chapel. Occasionally, they join Margaery for overnight chats. Alla enchants with ballads of heroism and lost romances, while Megha shares tales of her playful romantic escapades. Sansa wonders what Megha would think about kissing the Hound, as she had. Sansa thinks to herself, misremembering. He'd come to her that night of the battle, stinking of wine and blood. He kissed me and threatened to kill me and made me sing him a song. Megha naively praises King Joffrey's looks and sympathizes with Sansa over her presumed heartbreak. Sansa restrains herself from revealing the truth. Eleanor is engaged to a young squire celebrated for his bravery in the Battle of the Blackwater, where he fought valiantly wearing Eleanor's favor. Megha romanticizes the notion of having a champion fight in her honor, while Eleanor, despite her modesty, is visibly flattered by the praise. Sansa reflects on the cousins' naivety, recognizing their childish fantasies about love and heroism, dreams untouched by the harsh realities of what she has endured. She feels both pity and envy toward their blissful ignorance. Marjorie, blending her grandmother's sharpness with her own sweetness, takes Sansa's hawking outside the city for the first time since the battle. The scars of war are still visible at the Mudgate and along the Blackwater where destroyed ships lie with their charred remains jutting out. Despite the desolation, they cross the river to the Kingswood, a now barren landscape marked by ash and dead trees. Once safely in the Kingswood, Marjorie praises Willis for having the finest birds in the Seven Kingdoms and mentions he even flies an eagle. As they share a moment of camaraderie, Marjorie refers to Sansa affectionately as her sister, evoking Sansa's old wish for a sister like her, beautiful and gentle. She reflects on how Arya had been quite unsatisfactory as a sister in comparison. Overwhelmed by concern, Sansa tearfully warns Marjorie against marrying Joffrey, describing him as dangerous and deceptive. Marjorie, however, remains unfazed and reassures Sansa with a confident smile. She explains that her father ensured her safety by having Joffrey appoint Loras to his Kingsguard as a condition of their marriage, likening her protection to Aemon the Dragon Knight. Brushing aside the concerns with laughter, Marjorie then invites Sansa to race back to the river, playfully challenging the patience of their guards as she speeds away on her horse. As Sansa chases after Marjorie, she admires her bravery but is plagued by lingering doubts. While Sir Loras is celebrated as a formidable knight, Sansa realizes that Joffrey has other guards and future armies that might not respect Marjorie's safety as much. She recalls historical precedents where kings punish those close to them despite family ties or knightly vows, fearing that Joffrey could eventually reveal his cruel nature. When Sansa informs Sir Dontos of her arranged marriage to Willis Tyrell, expecting his support, she is shocked by his vehement opposition. This is how the Lannisters find out and marry her to Tyrion, since Dontos reports to Littlefinger, and after Sansa no longer wants to run away with Dontos, Littlefinger has to ruin the Willis marriage so Sansa will want to hide in the Vale with Littlefinger. Back to the story, Dontos, intoxicated and anxious, warns her against the Tyrells, comparing them to the Lannisters, and urges her to stick to their original escape plan, set for Joffrey's wedding night. When he attempts to show affection, Sansa pulls away, resolute that she no longer needs to escape through his plan, convinced that it would only lead to more trouble. She will be safe in Highgarden with Willis Tyrell. Dontos, however, persists, arguing that the Tyrells are only interested in her for her claim to Winterfell. This revelation confuses Sansa momentarily, as she had never considered herself in line for such a claim. Dontos reminds her she is heir to Winterfell, and desperately tries to convince her not to proceed with the marriage. But Sansa breaks away from his grasp and leaves him under the Heart Tree, never returning to the Godswood after that encounter. Despite distancing herself from Dontos and his plan, his words linger with her. At night, she reflects on her unexpected position as heir to Winterfell, especially with her younger brothers dead. However, she reassures herself that Robb will continue the Stark family line, and questions why Willis, set to inherit Highgarden, would have any interest in the starkly different northern realm of Winterfell. Sansa often whispers Willis's name softly, drawing comfort from the sound. She reflects that his name, reminiscent of Loras's, suits him well and dismisses concerns about his leg, given his status as the future Lord of Highgarden. Imagining a peaceful life with him, she envisions them together in lush gardens or enjoying melodies on a barge drifting along the Manda. Anticipating that having sons might strengthen his love for her, Sansa intends to name them Eddard, Brandon, and Rickon after her deceased brothers. She aims to nurture them to be as valiant as Sir Loras and to harbour a strong dislike for the Lannisters. In her dreams, her children closely resemble the siblings she has lost, and sometimes there's even a daughter who mirrors Arya. Sansa warns herself not to idolize Loras, fearing that Willis might detect her disappointment upon meeting, reminding herself that Willis is significantly older, has a disability, and might even resemble his robust, ruddy-faced father. Sansa acknowledges that regardless of his appearance, Willis may be her only protector. Sansa decides she'll take her new gown to Highgarden and hopes to impress Willis Tyrell, acknowledging that even if he's more interested in Winterfell than in her, he might still grow to love her. Clutching herself, Sansa eagerly anticipates the completion of the gown, excited to wear it. A Storm of Swords, Chapter 17. Arya III. The weather remains dreary on their third day of travel. Arya observes something amiss and feels they've been traveling south for too long. She tries to convince Gendry, who disagrees with her, and despite their disagreement, Gendry remains Arya's closest ally now that Hot Pie has left them. Hot Pie decided to stay behind, explaining to Arya that Shanna needed his help with baking bread. He expressed his fatigue from the constant travel, rain, and discomforts. He asked Arya if she would return after the war, politely adding "my lady," which made him blush. Arya, uncertain about the end of the war, apologized for beating him up and breaking his nose, noting his constant presence since their departure from King's Landing, and now she has grown accustomed to him. As Arya prepared to leave, Hot Pie requested to kiss her hand, but she playfully punched his shoulder, insisting on their familiar names, Ari and Hot Pie. She finds herself missing Hot Pie more than expected, but Harwin provides some comfort. Arya shares how she found his father Hullen dying near the Red Keep stables when she fled. She recounts her escape from King's Landing with Yoren and other events, but omits her darker actions like stabbing a stable boy and slicing a guard's throat. Arya likewise remains quiet about Jaqen H'ghar and the 3 lives he was indebted to and repaid. She conceals the iron coin he bestowed upon her within her belt, yet frequently retrieves it at night to reminisce how his appearance altered when he swept his hand over his face, whispering Vala Morghulis while recalling the names of those she plans to kill: Sir Gregor, Dunsen, Polliver, Raff the Sweetling, the Tickler, the Hound, Sir Ilyn, Sir Meryn, Queen Cersei, and King Joffrey. Harwin informs Arya that only 6 of the original 20 Winterfell men dispatched with Beric Dondarrion survived. He reveals it was a trap set by Lord Tywin, who dispatched the mountain across the Red Fork with destructive intentions, aiming to lure Lord Eddard to the west to confront Gregor Clegane. The plan was for Eddard to either be killed or captured and then exchanged for Tyrion, who was held by Arya's mother at the time. However, Jaime Lannister, unaware of Tywin's strategy, acted impulsively when he learnt of his brother's capture and attacked Lord Eddard in the streets of King's Landing. Arya somberly remembers this, particularly the death of Jory, who had always been kind to her. Instead, Ned dispatched Lord Beric with 40 men, including Harwin, to face Gregor Clegane. Ambushed at the Murmur's Ford, their group, which included notable names like Thoros and Sir Raymond Darry, was attacked from both ahead and behind by Gregor's hidden forces, leading to a fierce battle. He describes how the mountain fatally struck Raymond Darry with a blow that detached Darry's arm and slaughtered his horse. Encircled by foes, Harwin feared for his life, yet Alan succeeded in reinstating order, rallying those who still mounted to escape around Thoros. They began the day with 120 men. By dusk, only about 40 remained, with Lord Beric severely injured. That evening, Thoros extracted a fragment of lance from Beric's chest and sterilized the wound. Every member of their group was convinced that Lord Beric would not survive the night, but Thoros stayed by his side, praying through the darkness. By morning, Beric was unexpectedly stronger. It took him a fortnight to be able to ride again, but his resolve boasted everyone's spirits. He rallied his men, declaring that their war had only begun at the Murmur's Ford and promised to avenge their fallen comrades tenfold. As the conflict involved, they learned the Mountain's troops were merely the forefront of Lord Tywin's larger force, which had crossed the Red Fork and ravaged the Riverlands. With their numbers dwindled to a few, they could only skirmish from behind, hoping to join King Robert once he marched west. However, the news of King Robert's and Lord Eddard's death shocked them, revealing that Joffrey Lannister had claimed the throne. This revelation upended their mission. Originally sent to deal with outlaws by the king's hand, they now found themselves labelled as outlaws, with Lord Tywin as the hand of the king. Some considered surrendering, but Lord Beric insisted they continue as king's men to protect the people from the Lannisters. Beric's determination inspired a resistance. Surprisingly, for every fallen man, 2 more joined their cause, ranging from common folk to knights, and even women and children joined in. Back in the present, they spend the night in a seemingly deserted burnt village. A villager mentions to Lem that the Kingslayer has escaped. Arya listens intently to Tom O'Sevens, Jack B. Lucky, and Greenbeard, predicting that if the Kingslayer is free, it will result in a bloodbath. He suggests informing Thoros so that the Lord of Light can reveal the Lannisters' location in the flames. Anguy jests about their current fire. Lem muses that Lord Beric would relish capturing Jaime Lannister. A village woman asks if Jaime would be hanged, to which Anguy replies that Beric would ensure a trial first, then proceed with the hanging, eliciting laughter from the group. The mood lightens as Tom plucks at his woodharp, beginning a soft song. Tucked warmly between Gendry and Harwin, Arya sleeps. The next morning, as they travel, Arya realizes they are going in the wrong direction. Lem informs her that Riverrun isn't their destination. Tom attempts to alleviate Arya's concern, assuring her that no harm will come to her. However, Arya remains skeptical, accusing him of being a liar. This prompts Lem to clarify they never made any explicit promises regarding her final destination. Arya pleads with Greenbeard to take her to Riverrun and offering a reward. Greenbeard says Lord Beric will be the one to determine what should be done with her, hinting that he might send her back to her mother. Arya questions why she must meet him. Anguy explains that they bring all highborn captives to him. Arya spurs her horse into a swift escape, darting between Greenbeard and Jack B. Lucky. Gendry's surprised face flashes by as she races into the open field. Direction becomes irrelevant. Arya intends to navigate her way to Riverrun once she's lost her pursuers. She leans into the saddle, driving her horse into a relentless gallop. Glancing back, she notes Anguy, Harwin, and Greenbeard are still close on her heels, while Lem trails behind. After a long chase, it is Harwin who reaches Arya. Both horses are wary and frothing. He seizes her bridle to bring her to a stop, remarking on her impressive riding skills and likening her to her aunt, Lady Lyanna, while referencing his father's role as the master of horse. Arya gazes at him, feeling betrayed, and confronts him about his loyalty, reminding him that he was once her father's man. Harwin clarifies that since Lord Eddard has passed, he now pledges allegiances to the Lightning Lord and views his fellow outlaws as his brothers. Explaining he bears no ill will towards her brother Robb, their allegiance is to a different cause, the common folk rather than the nobility. Harwin then asks if Arya will return with him peacefully or if he needs to bind her. Arya consents to return peacefully, though she internally doesn't mean to keep her word for long. A Storm of Swords, it's Chapter 18. Samwell 1. Sam, overwhelmed with exhaustion, continues walking despite feeling unable to proceed. Tears streaming down his face, he longs for a brief rest by a fire and a bite of warm food. Yet he realizes that stopping would mean certain death. This grim fate is known to the remaining few of their group. Initially around 50 when they fled the Fist, some have since lost their way in the snow or succumbed to their wounds. Occasionally, Sam hears distant shouts from those behind him, and once a horrifying scream spurred him into a brief desperate run. If only his legs were stronger, he would still be running. haunted by the knowledge that their pursuers are relentlessly claiming them individually. A sudden unwanted memory of Maslin screaming for mercy surfaces. The man had dropped his sword and begged for mercy even as a white seized him by the throat, brutally ending his pleas. Sam reminds himself not to dwell on such memories or the merciless others. He tells himself to keep walking, to forget, as he sobs and takes another step. A concealed root catches Sam's toe, sending him tumbling onto one knee, sharply biting his tongue. He tastes blood, a warm contrast to the freezing air. Sam contemplates simply lying down in the snow and closing his eyes, resigned to the idea of dying there. He rationalizes that it wouldn't be so terrible. The cold would numb his pain, and soon he wouldn't feel anything at all. Many had perished around him on the Fist, and in the days following, he had witnessed it all. Assigned the duty of tending to the ravens because Maester Aemon was too old and blind, he was chosen despite his own reluctance. The Lord Commander stressed the crucial nature of his task, indicating that fear was not an excuse for failure, and threatened to pursue him through all 7 hells should he fail. Sam feels regret for not being braver or a better son and brother, but takes solace in knowing that he has fulfilled his duty by sending the ravens. He had prepared the messages ahead of time, writing simple reports of an attack on the Fist of the First Men and stored them safely, hoping they would never be necessary. He was asleep when the horn sounded. He awoke to chaos with the Black Brothers quickly arming and heading towards the ring wall amidst falling snow. Nearby, Chet, Maester Aemon's former steward, looked terrified. Ironically, he was there to kill Sam and begin the mutiny, but fled, and Sam thinks he fled to tend to the dogs. After this, a trembling Sam pulled the pre-written messages from the pouch. The ravens attacked him out of fear, but Sam managed to attach the message. After completing his duty, Sam quickly finished dressing and tightening his sword belt. He then packed his essentials, spare clothes, dragonglass weapons Jon gave him, an old horn that might be the Horn of Winter, and supplies. Outside, he spotted several men from the Shadow Tower wielding long axes and spears. The Black Brothers were poised with weapons, silently observing the snowfall and waiting. Sam kept to the back, searching for familiar faces like Gren or Dolores Ed, preferring to face the end with friends. However, he found himself among strangers from the Shadow Tower. As enemies approached, the arrows flew silently. A brief cheer from the men faded quickly as they realized the enemies weren't stopping, and more were spotted emerging from the trees. Overwhelmed by the unfolding chaos and the bitter cold, Sam started to retreat, shaking from fear as much as from the cold. Sam recalls his father, Lord Randall, who dispatched him to the wall, bequeathing the Tarly estate, castle, and the ancient greatsword Heartsbane to his younger brother Dickon. Sam doubts Dickon would grieve for him. Back during the battle at the Fist, Lord Commander Mormont, astride his horse, commanded the use of fire arrows. Noticing Sam shaking, he instructed him to retreat to the ravens. Upon learning that Sam had dispatched the messages, Mormont affirmed approvingly. Mormont told Sam to return to the Raven and ensure they were ready for more messages. He then proceeded around the perimeter, urging his men to attack their foes with fire. Sam didn't hesitate when instructed. He hurried back to the Ravens, moving as quickly as his legs would allow. Sam quickly penned his messages with quill and parchment. He documented the attack amidst snow and cold, detailing their successful repulsion of the enemies with fire arrows. While writing, he overheard Thorin Smallwood directing the archers and the comforting sound of arrows slicing through the air. Tywin's triumphant taunts to the burning enemies followed. Against a backdrop of cheers and curses from the brothers, Sam updated his message to confirm their safety and continued presence on the Fist of the First Men. Sam finished his previous note and started on a new parchment. He described how the battle on the Fist continued under heavy snowfall, noting the uncertainty of the outcome as the enemy pressed on. Sam glimpsed the large fire at the camp center, where mounted men, ready to charge at any breach in the ring wall, moved about. These men, the reserve, were preparing themselves with torches instead of swords, lighting them in the flames for their next confrontation. He quickly jotted down that white surrounded them. As he heard shouts from both the north and south faces of the camp, he noted that spears and swords were ineffective, with fire being the only weapon that worked. Amidst the chaos, he caught fragments of voices mentioning a giant and bears. Writing faster, he recorded reports of dead wildlings and uncertain creatures, while the clash of steel on wood signaled that whites had breached the ring wall and entered the camp. As mounted brothers rode past him toward the east, their burning brands leaving trails of flame, Sam noted that Lord Commander Mormont was meeting the enemy with fire. He scribbled different possibilities, unsure of the exact situation, that they were either winning, holding their ground, or cutting their way free, but also acknowledged they were hard-pressed and trapped on the fist, fighting for survival. A man from the Shadow Tower collapsed near Sam, crawling toward the fire before dying. Sam quickly wrote that the battle was lost and they were doomed. Back in the present, Sam tries to push away the memory of the fight at the fist. He attempts to focus on his mother, his sister Tala, or Gilly from Craster's Keep. Someone starts shaking him, urging him to get up and keep walking. Gren, covered in snow, warns him that there's no resting. As the old bear said, they die if they stop. Sam smiles and tells Gren to go ahead, assuring him he'll catch up after a bit more rest. But Gren insists Sam will either freeze or be taken by the others if he doesn't get up. The night before they left the wall, Pip teased Gren, smiling and saying Gren was a good choice for the ranging because he was too stupid to be terrified. Sam remembered Gren denying it until he realized what he was saying. Sam suspects Gren has always treated him kindly because of Jon. Without Jon, Sam doubts any of them would have accepted him. Now with Jon likely gone, Sam wants to cry, but his tears would freeze and he can barely keep his eyes open. Gren does everything he can to get Sam moving, even kicking him. Suddenly, Sam is lifted into the cold by Small Paul. As they move, Sam's head bobs with each of Paul's steps, continuing through the cold. Small Paul asks Sam if he could have one of his ravens, promising never to let it come to harm. Sam, filled with regret, acknowledges that the ravens have already flown back to the wall. Remembering the battle at the fist, Thorin Smallwood informed the old bear about the breach over the west wall, suggesting sending reserves. However, Mormont commanded a withdrawal instead, ordering a wedge formation to escape down the south face towards the east, despite objections about the route being overrun. In the midst of issuing commands, Mormont's Garren reared as a decayed bear staggered through the snow. Sam wet himself upon seeing the bear's rotting form, recalling Jon's description of the others with bright blue eyes. Thorin Smallwood attacked, his sword glowing in the firelight as he aimed it at the bear's head, which retaliated fatally by decapitating Thorin. As the chaos intensified, Mormont urgently ordered the men to ride out. Back in the present, some time has passed. Gren halts, realizing that they are secluded, unable to see any other torches. Paul, drained, carefully lowers Sam to the ground, confessing he can no longer bear his weight as he shivers with cold. All other torches have vanished, with only Gren's remaining, which flickers feebly amidst the darkness. Sam fears the torch going out, leaving them completely alone. But they aren't alone. As snow suddenly comes off the sentinel tree with a soft, wet thud, Gren quickly turns, brandishing his torch. From the darkness, a horse's head emerges. Initially, Sam feels a flicker of relief, which quickly dissipates as he observes the horse. Encased in hoarfrost, resembling a layer of frozen sweat, it has a tangle of stiff black entrails spilling from its open stomach. Atop its back is a rider, ghostly pale. The other dismounts with eerie grace, standing on the snow. It appears as slender as a blade and is milky white, its armor undulating and shifting as it moves, its feet barely making an impression on the freshly fallen snow. Small Paul removes the long-hafted axe from his back, questioning why the horse was harmed as it belonged to Morny. Sam searches for his sword but realizes his scabbard is empty, having lost it earlier at the fist. Grenn steps up, extending the torch aggressively, shouting at the other to back off. He jabs at the figure with the flames. The other's blade, emitting a soft blue light, swiftly approaches Grenn, slicing through the air. As the frosty blade meets the fire, a piercing scream assaults Sam's ears, feeling like a sharp needle. The torch's head falls off, disappearing into a deep snowbank, extinguishing the flame instantly and leaving Grenn with just a short piece of wood. He hurls it at the other, shouting, while Small Paul advances with his axe. The terror that overtakes Sam at that moment surpasses any he has ever known. He grasps his dagger firmly, ready to defend himself. The other moves as lightly as snow on the wind. Unlike the slow, clumsy wights, it effortlessly dodges Paul's axe, its armor shimmering with movement. Its crystalline sword twists, spins, and slides effortlessly through the iron rings of Paul's armor, penetrating leather, wool, bone, and flesh. The sword exits Paul's back with a prolonged hiss. Pierced through, his blood vaporizes around the blade. Paul tries to grasp his attacker, nearly succeeding before he collapses. The force of his fall wrenches the eerie pale sword from the other's hand. Tormented by voices, his father, Alliser Thorne, his brother Dickon, and Ras mocking him as a coward, Sam laughs uncontrollably. Suddenly, he hears Jon's voice urging him to go ahead. Yet, Jon is dead. Motivated by the voice, he stumbles forward, more tumbling than running, eyes shut, pushing the dagger blindly forward with both hands. He hears a snap, like ice fracture underfoot, followed by a shriek so shrill that he reels back, clutching his ears, and collapses onto the snow. When Sam opens his eyes, the other's armor trickles down its limbs in streams, with pale blue blood fizzing and steaming around the black dragonglass dagger lodged in its throat. It attempts to pull the blade out with its bone-white hands, but as its fingers contact the obsidian, they emit smoke. Sam rolls to his side, amazed as the other disintegrates into a fine white mist. Within moments, its flesh vanishes, leaving only translucent bones resembling milk glass, which too dissolves. Soon, only the dragonglass dagger remains, shrouded in steam as if it is alive and perspiring. Grenn tries to pick it up, but instantly releases it, remarking on its coldness. Sam manages to rise to his knees, referring to the weapon as dragonglass. Grenn helps Sam to stand and checks Small Paul for signs of life, closing his eyes solemnly. He picks up the dagger, and Sam suggests Grenn keep the dagger. Grenn points out that despite Sam's fears, he has managed to kill an other. He gestures towards the trees where a pink light is visible, indicating dawn and suggesting that direction is east. They decide to head that way to try and find Mormont. Sam makes an effort to move, kicking off the snow from his feet and determined to keep going. A Storm of Swords, Chapter 19. Tyrion III. Tywin's chain of golden hands sparkled against the rich wine-colored velvet of his tunic as he enters. Surrounding him are Loras Tyrell, Redwyn, and Rowan. He greets each lord, shares a discreet word with Varys, respectfully kisses the High Septon's ring, and affectionately pecks Cersei's cheek. After shaking hands with Grand Maester Pycelle, he takes his seat at the head of the long table. Tyrion takes over Pycelle's former spot at the foot of the table, elevated by cushions to allow him a clear view down its length. Displaced, Pycelle relocates next to Cersei, positioning himself as far from Tyrion as possible without occupying the king's seat. The Grand Maester appears frail, resembling a stumbling skeleton, relying on a twisted cane and trembling as he moves. Tyrion watches him, unremorseful. The attendees quickly secure their spots. Lord Mace Tyrell, Paxter Redwyn, Matthias Rowan, and the delicate High Septon. Tyrion notes the unfamiliar faces and the influx of new players, feeling sidelined. The lords had been polite, though Tyrion could sense their discomfort when they looked at him. Mace Tyrell had praised his clever use of the chain in a jovial tone, and Lord Redwyn had eagerly agreed. Tyrion, however, felt cynical about their compliments, thinking they should rather tell the city's people who glorified Renly's ghost. Tyrion's uncle Kevin shows the most warmth towards him, even kissing his cheek and telling him about his bravery, which he heard from Tyrion's cousin Lancel. Tyrion thinks to himself that Lancel better have good things to say about him. He manages a smile and asks how Lancel is doing. Kevin looks a bit worried as he talks about Lancel's inconsistent recovery, mentioning that Cersei often visits Lancel's side, trying to cheer him up and praying for him. After exploiting their cousin Lancel, Tyrion wonders whether Cersei is hoping for his recovery or demise, now that their father is back and she no longer needs Lancel. Today, Cersei's charm masks her true self. She smoothly interacts with the lords, praising their deeds and discussing Joffrey's wedding. When she proposes to start discussing wedding plans, Lord Tywin shifts the focus to the war instead, asking for Varys' report. Varys announces that Lord Randall had trapped Robert Glover at Duskendale, leading to a fierce skirmish with significant losses on both sides, but ending in their victory. Glover now heads towards Harrenhal, unaware that Sir Gregor and his troops are ready to intercept. Paxter Redwyn lauds the event as a triumph for King Joffrey, though Tyrion internally questions Joffrey's involvement. Littlefinger remarks on the defeat for the North, noting Robb Stark's absent from the battle, which leaves him undefeated. Mathis Rowan probes about Stark's current strategies, prompting Lord Tywin to reveal that Stark has retreated to Riverrun, leaving behind the western castles he had seized. He adds that their cousin, Sir Davin, is assembling their late father's troops, preparing to attack Riverrun with Sir Forley once Stark advances north. Lord Rowan questions whether Stark intends to head north given the Ironmen at Moat Catelyn. Mace Tyrell dismisses the value of a king without a kingdom, suggesting Stark should consolidate his forces with Roose Bolton to take on Moat Catelyn. Tyrion finds this suggestion almost laughable, recalling that in a year, Robb Stark had won more battles than Tyrell had in 20. Tyrell's reputation is based on a single inconclusive victory against Robert Baratheon at Ashford, a battle primarily won by Lord Tarly's forces before Tyrell's main army even arrived. Mace Tyrell also commanded the prolonged siege at Storm's End, which lasted a year without achieving any significant outcomes. Following the battle at the Trident, the Lord of Highgarden ultimately yielded, submitting to Eddard Stark. Sir Kevin Lannister updates the Lords on a new development. Balon Greyjoy, self-proclaimed King of the Isles and the North, has proposed an alliance. Cersei, irked, argues that Greyjoy should be pledging fealty instead of declaring himself king. Tywin explains Greyjoy's claim is by right of conquest. He details the strategic control Balon has secured: the Neck, Winterfell, Moat Catelyn, Deepwood Motte, and much of the Stony Shore. Tywin warns that Balon's fleet also poses a significant threat to Lannisport, Fair Isle, and even Highgarden. Lord Mathis Rowan inquires about the terms of Balon Greyjoy's proposed alliance. Tywin explains it requires acknowledging Balon's kingship and ceding all territories north of the Neck. Lord Redwyn humorously dismisses the value of the harsh northern lands, suggesting they accept the deal as a favourable exchange. Mace Tyrell agrees, proposing they let Greyjoy deal with the north while they concentrate on defeating Stannis. Without showing any emotions, Lord Tywin changes topic and brings up Lysa Arryn, noting her connections and her late husband's conspiracies with Stannis Baratheon. Mace Tyrell dismissively suggests ignoring her due to a lack of military inclination. Redwyn agrees, citing her non-involvement in the conflict. However, Tyrion reminds them of his own harsh treatment at her hands and her failure to pledge loyalty to King Joffrey, proposing that he handle her himself. Tyrion's suggestion is met with skepticism from Mace Tyrell, who doubts Tyrion's combat skills and advises leaving military matters to more capable hands. Lord Tywin quickly shifts focus, mentioning that Peter Baelish might be the key to gaining the Vale without warfare. Littlefinger cheekily confirms his influence in the Vale and proposes a plan to woo and marry Lysa Arryn, thus securing the region peacefully. His remark about previous intimate encounters with Lysa draws skeptical responses, with Cersei pointing out the difference between bedding and wedding. Littlefinger counters, suggesting that now, as Lord of Harrenhal, a union with the Lady of the Eyrie isn't far-fetched, portraying it as a strategic match that could benefit their cause. Tyrion observes a significant glance between Paxter Redwyn and Mace Tyrell as Lord Rowan voices concerns about maintaining Lysa Arryn's loyalty to the king. The High Septon adds that if Littlefinger can secure the Vale peacefully, it would be a divine blessing, though Redwyn questions his ability to control the young Lord Robert of the Eyrie. Littlefinger dismisses concerns about Robert's youth, asserting his confidence in turning him into a loyal ally. Tyrion, skeptical of the titles and promises being thrown around, especially Littlefinger's new role as Lord of Harrenhal, sees the political maneuvering as a mere performance, orchestrated by his father. Sir Kevan supports the strategy to keep the Vale neutral, while Tyrion challenges the council, questioning how the crown will manage its finances without Littlefinger, the master of coin. Littlefinger downplays his role, suggesting any skilled tradesman could manage the finances, implying even Tyrion could excel at it. Lord Tywin confirms this, appointing Tyrion as the new master of coin, a role that Tyrion reluctantly accepts amid praises from Sir Kevan. The meeting concludes with Tywin discussing logistics for Littlefinger's departure to the Vale to wed Lysa Arryn, aimed at solidifying their control over the East. Littlefinger plans to leave the next day, unfazed by missing the king's wedding, as he quips about the perils of autumn storms complicating his journey, humorously noting how drowning would be an unattractive look for a bridegroom. The council meeting moves back to the matter of the Greyjoy alliance, with Lord Redwyn advocating for it, highlighting the naval strength it could bring against Stannis Baratheon. Lord Tywin, however, dismisses the idea, questioning what they would gain from Greyjoy that they aren't already getting for free, suggesting that patience might reveal a more favourable option that doesn't involve conceding half the kingdom. Tyrion scrutinizes his father intently, remembering a previous discussion where Tywin pointed out that certain conflicts are resolved not solely through force but letters. Tyrion ponders the better alternative Tywin alludes to. As Sir Kevan steers the discussion towards the royal wedding, the High Septon and Cersei elaborate on the extensive arrangements for hosting the grand event. During this planning, Grand Maester Pycelle reveals that 300 Dornishmen are en route to King's Landing. Mace Tyrell, clearly annoyed, questions how the Dornishmen are crossing his territory without consent, his neck flushing with anger. The Dornish and Highgarden have a long history of hostility, often clashing even during peaceful times. This rivalry intensified after Oberyn the Red Viper injured the young heir of Highgarden in a joust. Observing the mounting tension, Tyrion anticipates a tricky situation and is keen to see how his father, Tywin, will manage it. Tywin explains that Prince Doran is travelling under his son's invitation, not only for the wedding, but also to claim his council seat and seek justice for past wrongs, his sister, Elia's, and her children's murder. Tyrion notes that the reactions of Lords Tyrell, Redwyn, and Rowan, sensing their discomfort with the situation, but none are brave enough to remind Tywin it was him who had them murdered. Sir Kevan Lannister attempts to soothe the tension by reminding Mace Tyrell that the upcoming marriages between the King and Margaery and Marcella and Prince Trystane will unite their families into one great house, suggesting that old rivalry should be left in the past. Lord Tywin reinforces this point. Lord Tyrell states he had no current issues with Doran Martell, but expects formal permission for crossing his lands. Privately, Tyrion doubts Doran's openness to such requests and predicts Prince Doran might bypass formality and take a direct route to the capital. Cersei downplays concerns about the Dornishmen's arrival, confident they can accommodate the guests without affecting the wedding. She suggests giving Prince Doran a prominent place at the event. However, Tyrion notices Mace Tyrell's reluctant agreement. Lord Tywin shifts the council's focus to distributing the spoils of war, inviting the lords to claim their rewards. Littlefinger, having already gained Harrenhal, comments on the sweetness of such rewards. The demands from various lords includes castles, villages, lands, and guardianships of orphaned minors, all made plentiful by the recent conflict. Varys provides detailed lists. 47 lesser lords and 619 knights had died fighting for Stannis, alongside thousands of common soldiers, all branded traitors. Their heirs are stripped of inheritance, their properties reassigned to the loyal. Highgarden claims the largest share. Tyrion notes Mace Tyrell's substantial appetite as Tyrell secures the lands and titles of Lord Alistair Florent, a former supporter of both Renly and Stannis. Lord Tywin readily agrees, granting Brightwater Keep and its associate revenues to Tyrell's second son, Sir Garland, instantly elevating him to a major lord. Sir Garland's brother, Willis, will inherit Highgarden itself. Smaller territories are allocated to Lord Rowan and reserved for notable figures such as Lord Tarly, Lady Oakheart, and Lord Hightower. Lord Redwyn's straightforward request for a 3-decade relief from wine taxes imposed by Littlefinger is approved. Delighted by this, he suggests celebrating with a cask of Arbor Gold to honour King Joffrey and his adept hand. They also discuss getting the High Septon a new crown. Tywin turns to Varys for updates, who reports several extraordinary sightings. A kraken near the Fingers, regional conflicts in the steppe zones, and the hatching of a 3-headed dragon in Calf. What Varys does, which is smart, is hide information about Daenerys' dragon with fanciful tales from the east, so no one believes dragons have actually returned. As proof of this, Tywin dismisses quickly these fantastical reports, more concerned with locating his missing nephew, Tyrek. Varys expresses sorrow over Tyrek's disappearance, while Sir Kevin shifts the discussion to some deserters from the city's guard have returned, seeking to resume their duties. Cersei demands execution for their cowardice, but Varys suggests sending them to the Night's Watch, citing disturbing news from the Wall. Mace Tyrell jokes about the array of threats they face, but Tywin proposes a harsher punishment, crippling the deserters to serve as a deterrent, then sending them to beg in the streets. Tyrion recalls his time at the Wall and its vulnerabilities, suggesting a compromise. He proposes crippling only those directly responsible for severe crimes, like the murder of Sir Jacelyn, and sending the others to aid the undermanned Night's Watch. Tywin considers the strategic implications, noting that if the wildlings overran the north, it could distract Robb Stark and Balon Greyjoy, who have both declared independence from the Iron Throne. Tywin concludes that any problems arising from the Wall's fall should be handled by the Northern Kings themselves. After Sir Kevin indicates that there are no further issues to discuss, Tyrion requests a private meeting with his family and Kevin as the council disperses. After the councillors leave, only the Lannisters remain. Tyrion, skeptical about his new role as Master of Coin, questions its origin. Tywin explains that Littlefinger proposed the idea, emphasizing the strategic benefit of a Lannister controlling the treasury. Tyrion expresses his distrust of Littlefinger, but Cersei recalls Littlefinger's past services, especially making Highgarden their ally. Despite this, Tyrion warns that Littlefinger's loyalty is fickle. Cersei mocks Tyrion, implying that Littlefinger's financial acumen is more valuable than any of Tyrion's skills. As the siblings continue to argue about Littlefinger's trustworthiness, Tywin loses patience and forcefully interrupts, demanding that they behave in a manner befitting their family name and stop their petty bickering. Sir Kevin advocates for Peter Baelish to rule the Eyrie over Lady Lysa's other suitors, describing them as dangerous and proud. He argues that Littlefinger is clever and recently proved his loyalty by revealing a Tyrell plot to marry Sansa Stark to Lord Mace's eldest son, Willis. Tyrion finds it interesting that this news came from Littlefinger rather than Varys, the Master of Whisperers, mostly because he got it from Sir Dontos, who Sansa told. Cersei insists on her control over Sansa, but Tywin explains that they must not refuse Lord Tyrell openly, as it could lead to distrust and offend their powerful allies. Tyrion cautions that upsetting Tyrell might push their other allies towards supporting Robb Stark. Determined to prevent any alliance between the Tyrells and Starks, Tywin proposes that Cersei's remarriage could strategically safeguard their position. As Cersei stands to leave the discussion, Tywin's calm yet firm response makes her reconsider. Her participation in choosing a new husband hinges on her staying. Resigningly, she sits back down, despite vocally refusing to remarry. Tywin firmly commands Cersei to remarry and have more children, arguing that each child she bears could counteract Stannis' accusations against her. He reflects on potential alliances through her marriage, considering lords like Mace Tyrell, Paxter Redwyn, and Doran Martell, who are married to younger women, and notes the strategic complications of allying with Balon Greyjoy. Cersei vehemently rejects the idea, her refusal stark and desperate. Tyrion watches the scene unfold, barely containing his amusement, especially at the thought of Cersei being sent to the Iron Islands. Tywin, undeterred by Cersei's objections, considers Oberyn Martell as a potential suitor, but acknowledges the potential upset it would cause with the Tyrells. He then suggests she might marry a younger man, to which Cersei protests against marrying anyone at all. Tywin continues to outline potential suitors for Cersei, mentioning the Redwyn twins, Theon Greyjoy, and Quentyn Martell, among others. However, he emphasizes the importance of strengthening the alliance with Highgarden, which played a crucial role in defeating Stannis Baratheon. With Sir Loras committed to the Kingsguard and Sir Garland already married, Tywin suggests Willis Tyrell, the eldest son, as a suitable match for Cersei. Observing Cersei's discomfort, Tyrion maliciously savors her reaction to Tywin's suggestion of marrying Willis Tyrell, whom he pointedly notes is crippled. Their father counters Tyrion's mocking comment with a firm look, prompting Willis Tyrell as a suitable match for Cersei. He emphasizes Willis's status as the heir to Highgarden and his gentle nature, noting his interest in reading, stargazing, and breeding animals. Tyrion internally debates whether to laugh or pity Cersei. Tywin asserts his preference for Willis as Cersei's suitor, but offers her the opportunity to propose an alternative. Cersei responds with sharp sarcasm, mocking the choices presented to her and requesting time to think. Tyrion silently notes the irony of Cersei's needing permission to leave, reflecting on her diminished authority compared to her title as queen. Tywin permits her to leave, but reminds her to reflect on her responsibilities. Cersei storms out of the room, visibly furious. Tyrion thinks to himself that ultimately she is likely to follow Tywin's commands, just as she did with her marriage to Robert. He also considers Jaime's reaction. Jaime was much younger when Cersei first married, and might not easily accept her remarrying now. Tyrion muses that any unfortunate fate befalling Willis Tyrell could endanger the alliance between Highgarden and Castle Rock. He wrestles with the decision of whether to reveal to their father that Cersei truly wishes to marry Jaime. As Tywin addresses Tyrion, he acknowledges Tyrion's promiscuity as a failure, but admits he may have overlooked Tyrion's needs due to his stature. He bluntly states that it's time for Tyrion to marry. Tyrion reacts with a mix of humor and bitterness, silently recalling his previous marriage. When Tywin questions if marriage amuses him, Tyrion quips about his suitability as a groom, while internally contemplating the strategic benefits a marriage could bring, such as land and a new position away from King Joffrey's court. However, Tyrion is also concerned about how Shae would react to his marriage, knowing she wouldn't be pleased. When Tyrion brings up the potential marriage to Sansa Stark, Tyrion points out the possible conflict with the Tyrells, who have their own maternal plans for her. Tywin dismisses this concern, explaining that since the Tyrells have not openly expressed their intentions, they cannot claim offense if Sansa marries before their plans are revealed. Sir Kevin suggests that any remaining tensions might be alleviated by offering Cersei as a bride for Willis Tyrell. Tyrion, distracted by the discomfort of his scarred nose, pointedly criticizes the plan to marry Sansa Stark to him. He highlights the harshness of making Sansa endure another unwanted marriage, especially after the torment she suffered under Joffrey, labeling the proposal as cruel, even by his father's standards. Lord Tywin, unfazed by emotional considerations, points out their primary aim is not Sansa's happiness, but securing political alliances, particularly in the north, where Sansa's status as a Stark holds significant value. He pragmatically views Sansa as a key to solidifying their control over the northern territories. Tyrion says Sansa is just a child, but Tywin counters that she's flowered. He tells Tyrion to consummate the marriage to make it official, but adds that Tyrion can wait a while before being with her again. In his thoughts, Tyrion feels he only needs Shae, and still sees Sansa as a girl. He suggests to Tywin that they could send Sansa back to her mother, which might make Robb Stark surrender. Tywin dismisses the idea of sending Sansa Stark away, reasoning that her mother would use her to forge alliances that will strengthen Robb Stark's position. He asserts that Sansa must marry a Lannister soon to keep her under their control. Sir Kevan adds that marrying Sansa could give a man claim to Winterfell. Tywin considers giving her to Tyrion's cousins if he doesn't want her. Tyrion feels conflicted inside. Tywin reminds Tyrion that he wanted a significant reward for his role in the battle, and Sansa is it. Tywin is adamant that Tyrion marry soon, suggesting even Lady Tanda's daughter, Lollys, as a desperate alternative, which Tyrion vehemently rejects. Tywin presses Tyrion to consider Sansa and suggests after the North and Balon fight for the North over the winter, Tyrion could invade in spring with his own son and Eddard Stark's grandson to claim Winterfell, expecting the North to rally behind the Stark heir. Tywin reminds Tyrion that although he will not inherit Castle Rock, he proposes that marrying Sansa Stark could position him as the Lord Protector of Winterfell. Initially taken aback by the prospect, Tyrion acknowledges the potential power, but noting a significant obstacle, Robb Stark, who is expected to produce heirs with one of the Frey women, thereby securing his own legacy and diminishing the value of Sansa's claim. Tywin informs Tyrion that Robb has married Jean Westerling instead of his promised Frey bride. This revelation surprises Tyrion, who is shocked by Robb's decision to forsake his Frey alliance. Sir Kevan provides further details about Jean Westerling, whose family background includes a spice trader. He notes Jean's sweetness and the Westerlings are an ancient house, but they are now impoverished. Tyrion questions Robb's judgment in choosing Jean. Tywin dismisses Robb's actions as typical of a youthful folly, driven by passion and honor rather than sense. When Tyrion challenges the honor in Robb's betrayal of his Frey alliance, Kevan defends Robb, suggesting he acted to preserve Jean's honor after compromising it by sleeping with her. Tyrion cynically remarks that leaving Jean unmarried might have been kinder given the likely dire consequences for her family. Tyrion is surprised that his father isn't more upset by the Westerling betrayal, given his notorious intolerance for disloyalty among his vassals. Tywin had famously destroyed the rebellious reigns of Castamere and the Tarbecks in his youth, events immortalized in the grim song, The Reigns of Castamere. This song was later used to quell further dissent, as with Lord Farman, who quickly fell in line after hearing it played in his hall. Tyrion muses that the Westerlings, being so close to the sites of these old rebellions, should have learned from this history. However, Tywin calmly suggests that the Westerlings are fully aware of the implications of crossing the Lannisters. Tyrion questions whether the Westerlings and their allies, the Spices, are foolish enough to think they can defeat the Lannisters. Tywin, nearly smiling at the questions, cryptically remarks that those considered fools are sometimes underestimated. He then firmly reiterates that Tyrion will marry Sansa Stark promptly. A Storm of Swords, Chapter 20. Catelyn III. The bodies are carried in and placed under the dais, casting a heavy silence over the hall. Amid the quiet, Catelyn hears Grey Wind howling from a distant part of the castle. Standing next to Robb, Catelyn briefly envisions her own sons, Bran and Rickon, in place of the dead boys. Though older, the lifeless figures appear shrunken and fragile. The blonde boy, who had been attempting to grow a beard, bears peach fuzz on his face above the gash that has ended his life. He had died peacefully, perhaps in his sleep. In contrast, the brown-haired boy fought for survival, evident by the defensive wounds on his arms and the numerous stab wounds across his body. Even after the rain had washed over him, the blood still oozed slowly from the fatal injuries. Robb, wearing his crown, stands in the hall. Shadows obscure his eyes as he gazes at the lifeless bodies. Catelyn wonders if he too is seeing Bran and Rickon in these dead boys. Though she feels she might cry, there are no tears left. Her thoughts shift to Sansa, imagining her lying lifeless and naked beneath the Iron Throne after they have killed her. Edmure stands to Robb's right. Around the hall, Robb's captains and bannermen gather. Sir Reynold and Sir Rolf are present. Though Robb had kept his queen, Jean Westerling, away from witnessing this grim scene. Catelyn remembers that the crag is close to Castle Rock, and it's possible that Jean had once known these boys, Tywin Frey and Willem Lannister, when they were all children. She waits silently as Robb stares at the bodies for what feels like a long time. Finally, he orders Small John Umber to have his father bring in the prisoners. When the Great John marches the prisoners in, Catelyn notices how some men step back, as if treason could be contagious through touch or proximity. The prisoners, soaked and silent, stand before Robb. He observes them and questions if they are all accounted for. The Great John informs him that there were 8, but 2 were killed in the fight, another is dying. Robb scrutinizes the expressions of the captives, commenting that it took 8 of them to slay 2 defenseless youths. Edmure Tully interrupts, mentioning that the prisoners also took the lives of 2 of his soldiers while breaching the tower. Lord Rickard Karstark, indifferent to the blood seeping down his face, justifies his actions, asserting that anyone who interferes with a father seeking retribution is inviting their own end. Catelyn is struck by the cruelty of Karstark's statement, burdened by guilt, feeling responsible. Robb then confronts Karstark, reminding him that Tion Frey and Willem Lannister were not responsible for the deaths of his sons, Torrhen and Eddard. He condemns the killing as reckless and unjust, stressing that Karstark's sons fell honorably in battle while the squires were helpless captives. Karstark remains unyielding, maintaining that Jaime Lannister was the one who killed his sons, and that these boys shared his bloodline, demanding that only blood can settle the debt. Robb points to the bodies, emphasizing that the squires were mere children, and had surrendered their weapons, making them defenseless. The old man directs his gaze to Catelyn, accusing her of being just as responsible for their deaths as he was. Robb, furious, asserts that his mother had no part in the crime, blaming full blame for the murders and betrayal on Karstark. Karstark, undeterred, questions Robb's authority, and arguing that slaying one's enemies cannot be considered treason, especially when Catelyn herself had released Jaime Lannister. The Great John reacts to Karstark's insolence, delivering a heavy blow that sends Karstark to his knees. Robb orders Umber to stop, and he steps away from the prisoner. Spitting out a tooth, Karstark mocks Robb, sarcastically suggesting that the king will only reprimand him before offering forgiveness for his betrayal. He continues to taunt Robb, calling him the king who lost the north. Enraged, the Great John seizes the spear and offers to kill Karstark immediately, eager to gut him. The doors of the chamber slam open, and the Blackfish strides in. Brendan takes off his helmet and kneels, addressing Robb with a single word. Robb stands and declares that he will meet with Sir Brendan in private in the audience chamber. Before departing, he orders the Great Jon to hold Lord Karstark and to execute the remaining 7 captives. The Great Jon, lowering his spear, asks if that includes the dead men. Robb confirms, stating he will not have their corpses polluting his uncle's rivers and that they should be left for the crows. One prisoner drops to his knee, begging for mercy, claiming he hasn't killed anyone and was merely stationed at the door as a lookout. Robb pauses, questioning whether he had known of Lord Karstark's intentions, seen the weapons drawn, and heard the pleas and cries for mercy. The man confesses he did, but swears he wasn't involved. Robb instructs Lord Umber to hang that man last, ensuring he will witness the others' deaths first. He then turns to his mother and uncle, asking them to join him. Outside, the thunder crashes so fiercely it feels as though the entire castle is shaking. Catelyn wonders if this is the sound of a kingdom crumbling. The audience chamber is dim. Only Edmure takes a seat, quickly standing again when he notices the others remaining upright. Robb removes his crown and places it on the table in front of him. The Blackfish secures the door and informs them that the Karstarks have left. Robb, his voice thick with either rage or sorrow, asks if all of them are gone. Sir Brendan confirms that every fighting man has departed, leaving behind only a handful of camp followers and servants with the wounded. He explains that they began slipping away in small numbers, then in larger groups, using the wounded and servants to keep the illusion of a full camp by maintaining the fires. But once the rain began, the deception no longer mattered. Robb asks if the Karstarks would regroup elsewhere, and Sir Brendan assures him they have scattered, with Lord Karstark offering his daughter's hand to any man who brings him Jaime Lannister's head. Catelyn feels another wave of sickness rise. Robb rubs his temples where the crown had pressed into his skin, lamenting the loss of nearly 300 riders and twice as many horses, the mounted strength of Karhold gone. Catelyn understands the dire predicament Robb is in, surrounded by foes on all sides except the east, where Lysa remains isolated on her mountain stronghold. Losing the Karstarks only worsens the situation. Edmure suggests keeping the news of the Karstarks' departure inside Riverrun, dreading what Tywin Lannister might do when he learns of it. Catelyn's thoughts drift to Sansa, and she clenches her hands tightly. Edmure also suggests not revealing what Karstark has done. Robb casts a cold glance at Edmure, accusing him of wanting to make him both a liar and a killer. Edmure responds by suggesting they remain silent and bury the dead boys until the war concludes. He points out that Willem Lannister was Kevan Lannister's son, and Tion was connected to Lady Jenna and the Freys. He proposes the news not reach the Freys at the twins too. The Blackfish dismisses this notion, saying that the truth has already left with the Karstarks, making it too late for such schemes. Robb insists that he owes the fathers both honesty and justice. He acknowledges that Lord Rickard defied himself and betrayed him, leaving him no option but to sentence him. He fears how the Karstark foot soldiers with Roose Bolton will react when they hear about the execution, and decides Bolton needs to be warned. Sir Brendan reminds Robb that Karstark's heir is a prisoner at Harrenhal. Robb tells his uncle that the man's name is Harrion, and bitterly remarks that a king should know his enemies' names. The Blackfish questions if Harrion will truly become an enemy, and Robb replies that he has no doubt, as he is about to execute Harrion's father. Edmure suggests pardoning Karstark, which Robb meets with disbelief. Edmure clarifies that Karstark should be punished, but kept alive as a prisoner instead of executed. Catelyn reflects on the possibility of using him as a hostage, and Edmure quickly latches on to the idea, hoping that they could offer the son his father's life in exchange for loyalty. Robb, disheartened, contemplates the silence from the north, the lack of response from Walder Freys, and the absence of aid from the Eyrie. He turns to Catelyn, seeking comfort, but she cannot provide it. She knows the messages have reached Lysa, but her sister will not offer help. Catelyn reflects on how, as a child, Lysa would always run and hide after doing something wrong, thinking their father would forget his anger if he couldn't find her. Now it feels the same. Lysa fled from King's Landing to the Eyrie, the safest place she knows, and waits there, hoping to be forgotten. Robb expresses frustration, saying the Knights of the Vale could change the course of the war, but since Lysa refuses to join the fight, he's only asked her to open the Bloody Gate and provide ships at Goldtown to help them move north. Robb believes that landing at White Harbor would let him outflank Moat Catelyn and drive the Ironborn from the north in 12 months, avoiding the difficult path through the Neck. The Blackfish agrees with Catelyn, stating that Lady Lysa is too fearful to allow any army into the Vale, so the Bloody Gate will stay closed. Robb, filled with despair, curses Lysa, Rickard Karstark, Theon Greyjoy, Walder Frey, Tywin Lannister, and the rest. He laments the burdens of being king, recalling how, when men declared him king in the north, he swore to be a good and honourable king like his father. But now he can no longer distinguish friend from foe. Lord Rickard fought beside him in many battles, and his sons died for him at the Whispering Wood. Tion Frey and Willem Lannister were his enemies, yet now he has to execute Lord Rickard, his friend's father, for their deaths. Robb asks whether the Lannisters or Freys will appreciate Lord Rickard's execution. The Blackfish, blunt as always, replies they will not. Edmure urges Robb to reconsider, suggesting they spare Lord Rickard and keep him as a hostage. Robb places his heavy crown back on his head and assumes his role as king, declaring that Lord Rickard must die. Edmure protests, but Robb holds firm. Rickard Karstark did more than take their lives. He destroyed Robb's honor. Robb decides that Lord Rickard's fate will be sealed at dawn. At daybreak, the Godswood is filled with river lords, Northmen, knights, and common folk gathered to witness the execution. Edmure had set up a headsman's block before the Heart Tree. As rain fell, the Great Jon's men brought forward Lord Rickard Karstark, his hands bound. His men already hung lifeless from Riverrun's walls. Robb takes the poleaxe from Long Lu, declaring that since Karstark's death is by his command, it must be by his hand as well. Lord Rickard gives Robb a stiff nod, acknowledging the courtesy, but nothing more. He reminds Robb of their shared blood, the blood of the First Men, and noting his connection to Robb's grandfather and father. Despite this, Robb, unmoved, orders him to kneel, explaining that kinship did not prevent his betrayal and will not save him. Catelyn understands that the Karstarks originate from Carlin Stark, a lesser son of Winterfell, who defeated a rebellious lord 1,000 years ago and received Carhold lands as a reward for his courage, and over time the Stark family there turned into the Karstarks. Karstark, unyielding, claims no curse is worse than being a kinslayer. His final words are a curse, rejecting Robb as his king. The axe strikes true, ending Karstark's life with a single blow, though it takes 3 swings to fully sever his head. By the time it's over, both Robb and the body are soaked in blood, showcasing this execution as being a reckless mistake on Robb's part that gained him nothing. Disgusted, Robb throws the axe aside and turns to the Heart Tree, trembling as rain runs down his face. Later, the Blackfish gathers 100 riders to pursue the remaining Karstarks, though few expect many to be found. Before departing, he grimly remarks that he hopes he won't need to hang any of them. With the Blackfish gone, Catelyn returns to her father's Solar to sit by Lord Hoster's bed once again. Maester Vyman warns Catelyn that her father's strength is nearly gone. Later, Jean Westerling visits timidly, worried about Robb. Catelyn reassures her that she is welcome and invites her to sit. Jean confides in Catelyn, expressing her concern about Robb's anger and sadness after executing Lord Karstark. Jean had suggested Robb use a headsman like Tywin does, but Robb, following his father's teachings, insisted on doing it himself. Jean shares how Robb hasn't eaten all day, spent the morning writing a letter only to burn it, and has now been staring at maps since. She feels helpless, wanting to be a good wife, but unsure how to support him. Jean asks her to tell her what to do, though Catelyn internally has no idea. Catelyn advises Jean that sometimes the best thing to do is to wait. She recounts her early days at Winterfell, how she felt hurt when Ned would retreat to the Godswood, but realized that part of him was connected to the North, something she couldn't share. She encourages Jean to be patient, assuring her that Robb will return to her in time. As Jean is about to leave, Catelyn calls after her, reminding her that Robb needs an heir. Jean smiles, saying her mother gives her a posset to help with fertility, and she and Robb try often. However, Jean's mother, Sibel, is actually giving her moon tea under the instruction of Tywin Lannister. Jean, blushing, promises she'll be with child soon, noting how she prays nightly for it. After Jean leaves, Catelyn turns back to her father. She thinks of Jean's promise of twins named Eddard and Brandon, and wonders if there might one day be a Hoster as well. She thinks about Jean, noting the girl's good heart, and perhaps more importantly, her good hips. A Storm of Swords, Chapter 21. Jaime III. As Jaime, Brienne, and Cleos traverse along the King's Road, the landscape is filled with charred fields and orchards, with bridges demolished and no waterways for them to cross. Upon arriving at Maidenpool, the fortress still hoists Lord Mutin's red salmon emblem, but the encircling town fortifications, barriers, and storefronts have been either torched or pillaged. Jaime glances at the scene and immediately starts singing a cheeky song about 6 maids in a pool, which annoys Brienne. Cleos, worried about attracting unwanted attention, pleads with Jaime to stop singing. Jaime continues to provoke Brienne, who threatens to gag him if he doesn't keep quiet. Jaime teases her further about taking a bath in the nearby pool, reminiscing about how he used to help Cersei with her baths when they were children. Brienne, frustrated, turns her horse and trots away from the charred remains of Maidenpool. Jaime and Sir Cleos follow her. Cleos notes that Brienne is choosing the Duskendale Road and suggests the coastal route might be safer. Jaime, preferring speed over safety, dismisses the suggestion, candidly expressing his boredom with Cleos' company. Jaime finds being apart from Cersei unbearable. From childhood, Jaime and Cersei were inseparable, often sharing beds and embracing as they slept. Their bond began in the womb. Growing up, they mimicked animal behaviors they observed in the fields and in the kennels. Their antics eventually shocked a maid who informed their mother, Lady Joanna. Disturbed by their actions, she separated their rooms and stationed a guard by Cersei's door, warning them sternly against such conduct. Despite the threat of being told to their father, their worries were short-lived, as Lady Joanna died soon after during Tyrion's birth, leaving Jaime with scant memories of her. He reflects that Stannis Baratheon and the Starks may have inadvertently helped him by spreading rumors of his incestuous relationship with Cersei, as this has removed the need for secrecy. Jaime considers the possibility of marrying Cersei openly, drawing a parallel with the Targaryen tradition of marrying within the family. He rationalizes that the realm turned a blind eye to the Targaryen for centuries, and might do the same for the Lannisters. Although such a union would complicate Joffrey's claim to the throne, Jaime muses that ultimately it was armies that secured the throne for Robert Baratheon, and it could maintain Joffrey's position as well. He even contemplates marrying Joffrey to Marcella after sending Sansa Stark back to her family as a bold statement of the Lannisters' superiority and exemption from the laws governing others. Jaime had resolved to return Sansa to her family, and also Arya if she could be located. Although he doubted this action would restore his lost honor, the idea of honoring a commitment when everyone expected him to betray them amuses him greatly. As they traverse a damaged wheat field, Jaime hears a sudden rustling noise behind them. He yells for them to get down. In that instant, an arrow strikes his horse's rump. More arrows zip past. Jaime sees Sir Cleos Frey get hit and fall from his saddle. His foot entangles in the stirrup and he is dragged along, yelling as his horse bolts. Jaime's horse, wounded and in pain, struggles to move. As Jaime scans for Brienne, he notices she's still on her horse, arrows embedded in her back and leg, but she appears unfazed. She draws her sword and scans for the bowman. Jaime spots the bowman behind the wall and alerts her. Struggling to control his impaired horse, his efforts are complicated by his chains. As arrows fly through the air once more, Jaime urges her to charge, which she does, thundering past him, shouting her battle cry of Evenfall and Tarth as she wields her longsword. As the last few arrows miss their mark, the bowmen quickly scatter, behaving as archers typically do when faced with a charge of knights. Brienne halts at the wall, and by the time Jaime catches up to her, the bowmen have disappeared into the nearby woods. Jaime chides her for not pursuing the fleeing men, pointing out that it's the ideal time to strike. Brienne sheaths her sword, questioning Jaime's decision to charge. Jaime explains that bowmen tend to be bold only when they can remain hidden and attack from a distance, but they flee when directly confronted, knowing the likely outcome if they are caught. He then informs Brienne of her injuries and offers to tend to them before humorously remarking about his cousin Cleos. Last seen when his horse was dragging him, suggesting they should check on him since he is, after all, still half Lannister. Jaime and Brienne find Cleos entangled in his stirrup, fatally injured with an arrow in his arm and another in his chest. But it was the severe head trauma from being dragged that killed him. As Jaime examines the extent of Cleos's head injuries, Brienne kneels beside him, noting his body is still warm. Jaime, however, pragmatically wants to take Cleos's horse, clothes, and sword to improve their defense. Brienne is appalled, reminding Jaime that Cleos was his cousin. Jaime dismisses her concern and swears not to harm her if armed. But Brienne remains unmoved, insisting he step away from Cleos and stop taking his belongings. Exhausted by Brienne's constant suspicions and criticisms, Jaime forcefully retrieves his cousin's longsword, using his foot against the corpse to pull the blade free. As he swings the sword in a lethal arc, Brienne miraculously intercepts with her own blade just in time, causing a sharp clash of steel. Jaime, amused by her quick response, commends her skill. Undeterred, Brienne demands the sword, calling him Kingslayer as she stands ready to face him. Invigorated by the confrontation, Jaime launches into an aggressive assault with the longsword. Brienne reacts swiftly, retreating and defending against each strike, but Jaime is relentless. Each time she deflects one blow, another follows immediately. Their swords clash and separate repeatedly. He revels in the battle, feeling most alive in such moments of peril. Jaime considers that the chains might even the odds a bit, giving Brienne a chance to challenge him. He uses a two-handed grip because of the chains, but he is confident that he can still defeat Brienne. Jaime unleashes a furious barrage of strikes from every angle. However, Brienne keeps defending. Finally, gasping for air, Jaime pauses, lowering his sword to grant them both a brief respite. He condescendingly compliments her skill, remarking she's not half as bad for a wench. Catching her breath and maintaining a cautious gaze, Brienne asserts that she has no intention of harming him. Jaime, dismissive and confident, scoffs at the idea that she could, swiftly raising his sword and launching into another aggressive attack. Their battle endures so intensely that the passage of time blurs. During another brief pause in their duel, Jaime catches his breath and compliments Brienne before inviting her to continue their dance. Brienne responds with renewed vigor, putting Jaime on the defensive. She manages to land a slice across his brow, blinding him with blood in his right eye. Frustrated and cursing, Jaime feels the toll of his captivity, the deterioration of his skills and the additional challenge posed by his chains. Fatigue sets in, his shoulders numb and wrists ache under the weight of his bonds and weapon. As the fight drags on, Jaime's sword feels increasingly heavier, his swings slower and less precise than before. Jaime is struck by a sobering realization during their fight. Brienne is physically stronger than he is. He recalls others who had the upper hand in strength, Robert Baratheon, Gerald Hightower, and Arthur Dayne among the deceased. And among the living, Greatjon Umber, Strongbor of Crakehall, and the Clegane brothers, with the mountain strength being almost inhuman. Typically, Jaime's superior speed and skill allow him to overcome stronger opponents, but Brienne's strength is unsettling because she is a woman. Instead of tiring, she gains the upper hand and drives Jaime back into the brook once more. In a commanding tone, she demands his surrender. A slippery stone shifts under Jaime's foot, causing him to stumble. Brienne knocks his sword away and towers over him, shouting for him to yield. Jaime drives his shoulder into Brienne's leg, toppling her onto him. They roll, exchanging kicks and punches until she ends up straddling him. Gasping, Jaime spits water at her in defiance, so she dunks his head underwater, lifting it briefly only to shove him back down. She threatens him to yield or to drown. He sneers at Brienne, taunting her about breaking her oath like he did. She releases him and he splashes down into the water, only to hear laughter echoing through the woods. Brienne scrambles to her feet. Jaime drags himself to the shallow water and notices armed men flanking the brook. Realizing they must have been drawn by the noise, he greets them with a mocking tone, joking that they interrupted him chastising his wife. A rough-looking man missing part of his nose under an iron half-helm comments that Brienne seemed to be doing the chastising. Jaime studies the group and recognizes them. Not Cleos's killers, but a mix of Dornishmen, Lyseni, Dothraki, Ibonesi, and Summer Islanders. He knows them as the infamous Brave Companions. Brienne, finding her voice, offers 100 stags to the men. A corpse-like figure in a torn leather cloak agrees to take that as a start, while the noseless man and others make crude remarks about abusing Brienne. Despite her stubborn and rough exterior, Jaime knows she deserves better than being abused by this group. He loudly demands to know who's in charge. The thin, pale man with red-rimmed eyes introduces himself as Erzwick the Faithful and confirms he knows Jaime's identity, noting the brave companions aren't easily fooled by a mere disguise. Jaime holds no regard for the bloody murmurs, who are just as brutal as Gregor Clegane and Amory Lorch. His father had always called such men dogs, using them ruthlessly to hunt down his enemies. Jaime tells Erzwick that if he truly knows who Jaime is, then he knows a reward is inevitable. A Lannister always pays his debts. He then points out Brienne's highborn status, noting her value as a ransom. Erzwick responds with a sly smile that unsettles Jaime. When Jaime asks about the goat, Erzwick remains that the goat is nearby and would likely welcome Jaime, but advises against calling him that to his face, as Lord Vogo Hoat is now sensitive about his identity. Jaime internally wonders how Vargo could have any dignity, then asks Erzwick what title Vargo claims. Erzwick replies that Hoat has been promised Harrenhal, a revelation that makes Jaime question his father's judgment. Raising his chained hands, Jaime demands they be removed, but Erzwick only gives a dry, mocking laugh in response. Jaime senses something is wrong, but conceals his discomfort with a smile, casually asking what's so amusing. The Dornishman chimes in, pointing out that Jaime's family lost too many battles, forcing them to trade their Lannister allegiance for loyalty to the Starks. Erzwick clarifies that the Brave Companions are no longer in the service of House Lannister, but now answer to Lord Bolton and the King in the North. Jaime gives him a cold, scornful smile, remarking on the irony that he is now the one accused of lacking honor. Erswick, displeased with Jaime's insult, signals two of the murmurs to seize him while Rorge lands a hard blow to Jaime's stomach. As Jaime doubles over, Brienne protests, reminding them that Jaime is under her protection as part of an agreed exchange by Lady Catelyn. Her words are ignored as Rorge hits Jaime again, forcing the air from his lungs. Brienne reaches for her sword, but the murmurs overpower her, requiring 4 of them to finally subdue her. By the end, both Jaime and Brienne are left bloodied and battered. Brienne's face is bruised and swollen, and 2 of her teeth are missing. The captives, wounded and stumbling, are dragged back to the horses, with Brienne limping from the injuries Jaime inflicted during their fight. Jaime, feeling a pang of regret, fears for her, certain that the noseless man and others will take advantage of her that night. The Dornishman ties Jaime and Brienne back to back on her horse as the murmurs strip Cleos Frey's body. Jaime, spitting blood, bitterly tells Brienne that arming him would have prevented their capture. She stays silent, which he sees as stubbornness, but also bravery. He warns her that she'll likely face by nightfall and advises against resisting to avoid further harm. Brienne pointedly asks if Jaime would follow his own advice in her position. Jaime replies he'd make them kill him if he were a woman, though he isn't. He kicks their horse forward and calls to Erswick, offering him gold, asking him if he likes it. Erswick, intrigued, admits it has its uses. Jaime, with a sly smile, suggests to Erswick that he could claim all the gold at Castle Rock by taking them to King's Landing and collecting Jaime's ransom instead of letting Vargo Hoat have it. He even hints that Brienne's Sapphire Island heritage could add to the reward. Brienne shifts uncomfortably, but stays silent. Erswick, appearing doubtful, briefly considers the proposal, but mentions the distance to King's Landing and the likelihood of Lord Tywin holding a grudge against them for giving Harrenhal to Bolton. Jaime notes Erswick's cunning. He promises to handle his father, offering Erswick a pardon and knighthood in exchange for help. Erswick, intrigued by the title, darkly recalls how proud his late wife would have been, wishing he didn't kill her. He then questions what would happen to Vargo Hoat. With a hint of menace, Jaime replies that Hoat will fare poorly against his father's wrath. Erswick remains skeptical, questioning if Tywin Lannister's reach is truly long enough to breach Harrenhal and capture them. Jaime assures him that Harrenhal has fallen before and that Hoat is no match for the might of House Lannister. Erswick casually slaps Jaime across the face. Jaime realizes with a chill that Erswick holds no fear of him, dismissing Jaime's promises as empty words from an oathbreaker. Kicking his horse, Erswick rides ahead, leaving Jaime to brood on his past with Aerys and wish for 2 swords so he and Brienne could at least take down some of their captors even if they didn't survive. By the day's end, they reach Vargo Hoat, looting a small sept with his brave companions. Nearby, a dead septon hangs from a tree, used as a target practice, with arrows piercing both eyes. As Erswick arrives with the captives, Vargo Hoat claims Jaime as his prisoner in a lisping tone. Brienne introduces herself and appeals to Lady Catelyn's orders to take Jaime to King's Landing, but Hoat, uninterested, orders her silenced. Robb separates her from Jaime. Vargo Hoat expresses his delight at capturing Jaime. Jaime recalls Hoat's mercenary nature and attempts to tempt him with promise of a hefty ransom from Tywin. Hoat, however, assures him that he'll claim half of Castle Rock's gold, but first needs to send Tywin a message, issuing orders to his men. Erswick shoves Jaime forward, and a jester in motley trips him, sending Jaime to the ground. An archer grabs Jaime's chained wrists, yanking them forward, while a fat Dothraki unsheaths his massive razor-sharp arak. Jaime recognizes the attempt to intimidate him, but steels himself, recalling his pride as a Lannister and Lord Commander. As the Dothraki raises his arak, sunlight glints along the blade's edge, descending too fast to track. In that instant, despite his resolve, Jaime can't suppress his scream. A Storm of Swords, Chapter 22. Arya IV. Half in ruins, the small square keep houses an elderly knight who seems lost in his memories, unable to answer their questions clearly. Fortunately, the young maester explains that months ago, a raven brought word that the Lannisters had captured and hanged Lord Beric near the God's Eye. Lem counters that Thoros cut Beric down before he could die. The maester, unconvinced, suggests they consult the Lady of the Leaves, and Greenbeard agrees. Crossing a small stone bridge behind the keep, Gendry, Jack B. Lucky, and Tom Sevenstrings discuss the elderly knight Sir Maynard and argue he could have been as legendary as the Dragon Knight if he'd kept a singer to spread his story, showcasing the powers singers or songs have on the world. Arya asks Anguy about the Lady of the Leaves, and he tells her she'll soon see for herself. As they ride through a yellowing wood 3 days later, Jack B. Lucky blows a horn and rope ladders descend from the trees. They climb up to a hidden treetop village. They meet the Lady of the Leaves, a frail, white-haired woman who warns they can't stay long with wolves nearby, probably Karstarks. When asked about Lord Beric, she sorrowfully recounts hearing that Sir Gregor killed him by driving a dagger through his eye. Lem dismisses this as an old story. Relieved, the lady blesses Lem and prays for Beric and the Red Priest's protection. They find shelter the next night in the burned remains of a sept. An elderly septon explains that looters stripped everything of value. When asked if the Murmurs were responsible, he replies that Northmen searching for the Kingslayer caused the destruction. Arya overhears this and feels Gendry's gaze on her, sparking anger and shame. In the vault below the sept, nobody knows where Beric Dondarrion is. Greenbeard jokes that the Lightning Lord is everywhere and nowhere, calling her a skinny squirrel. Arya, irritated, insists she's not a squirrel and nearly a woman, soon to be 11, and slaps his hand away when he tries to tickle her chin. That evening, Lem and Gendry play tiles with the locals while Tom Sevenstring sings a humorous song. Anguy lets Arya try his longbow, but she finds it too strong to draw. He suggests making her a lighter bow if they reach Riverrun. Overhearing, Tom interrupts, calling Anguy foolish, warning that Lord Hoster of Riverrun is known for hanging outlaws, and his son, a music hater, is equally untrustworthy. Lem tells Tom that it isn't music the Lord's son hates, but Tom himself. Tom protests, claiming the man has no reason for it, especially since the wench had been willing to be with him, and it wasn't his fault the Lord's son had drunk too many to follow through. Lem retorts, questioning if it was Tom who turned the incident into a song. Tom insists he only sang it once and argues it wasn't even about the Lord's son, just a fish. Anguy laughs, adding a floppy fish. The floppy fish is meant to be Edmure's penis. Uninterested in the banter, Arya turns to Harwin and asks about the mention of ransom. Harwin explains that they're in dire need of supplies and sees Arya's ransom as a way to secure these necessities. He gently touches her chin, assuring it will be fine. Yet doubts linger and Arya wonders what will happen if Robb refuses to pay. She's not a famous knight, and kings are supposed to prioritize the realm over family. She wonders if her mother would even want her back after everything she's done. The next day, they reach High Heart, a tall hill with a vast view. Tom tells Arya that the locals avoid High Heart, believing it haunted by the spirits of the ancient children of the forest who perished when an Andal king, Eric the Kinslayer, destroyed their sacred grove. Arya recalls how she used to hide in the crypts of Winterfell to play among the Stone Kings. However, that night, a storm disturbs her sleep, and she hears voices in the darkness, unsettling her. By the campfire embers, Arya spots Tom, Lem, and Greenbeard speaking with a woman, shorter than Arya and older than Old Nan. Stooped and wrinkled, her long white hair nearly touches the ground with seemingly red eyes. She is probably a children of the forest and foretells that Renly was killed by a shadow baby. Euron getting a faceless assassin to kill Balon, Catelyn being killed and thrown into a river before becoming Lady Stoneheart, the Kingsmoot after Balon's death, Gregor Clegane killing Vargo Hoat, the Red Wedding and Jingle Bell's death, the Purple Wedding, and Sansa knocking Robb and Arryn into her snow model of Winterfell. The old woman then asks if they have gifts to offer her in exchange for her dreams. Lem Lemoncloak grumbles about the woman's cryptic dreams, dismissing them as nonsense. Tom Sevenstring plays her a soft, sorrowful tune that Arya barely knows. She thinks Sansa would likely recognize it. As they saddle their horses, Arya notices the white-haired woman is gone and asks about her. He thinks she is a dwarf, but adds that what truly matters is they now have a lead to find Thoros and the Lightning Lord. Arya, curious, questions why they're still hiding if Tom and the others are indeed their men. Tom rolls his eyes, but Harwin explains that Lord Beric keeps his movements secret so no one can betray him. With hundreds, possibly thousands sworn to him, his men move in small bands which allow them to strike multiple places at once and disappear before the enemy reacts. Harwin adds that if any of them are captured or tortured, they can't reveal Beric's location because they don't know it themselves. He pauses, asking Arya if she understands what put to the question means. Arya nods, explaining that the torture was called tickling by Polliver, Raff, and the others. She recounts the time she and Gendry were captured near the God's Eye, describing how the tickler interrogated the villagers. Arya recalls the horrors vividly, the shrieks, and the sickening smell of blood, burning flesh, and feces. Harwin, visibly affected, says no child should have to endure such horrors. He mentions that the mountain suffered heavy losses at the stone mill, so perhaps the tickler is already dead. Harwin recalls that Lord Beric said that the war began with his mission to bring justice to Gregor Clegane, and he intends to end it the same way. They mount up and ride to Acorn Hall. By dusk, they reach it. Lord Smallwood of Acorn Hill is off fighting with his liege Lord Vance. However, Smallwood's wife, an old friend and rumoured former lover of Tom Sevenstrings, allows them entry. Lady Smallwood quickly scolds them for dragging a young girl into the dangers of war, and her anger intensifies upon learning Arya is highborn. Arya is promptly taken upstairs, bathed in scalding hot water, and scrubbed vigorously by the maids. After the bath, the maids dress Arya in clothes borrowed from Lady Smallwood's daughter, who was sent to Oldtown for safety. Lady Smallwood recalls her daughter's love of dancing and singing, then asks Arya what she enjoys. Arya answers needlework, which Lady Smallwood, misunderstanding, praises as a peaceful pastime. Lady Smallwood adjusts Arya's gown, noting she now looks like a proper young lady, though Arya thinks to herself that she's not a lady, but a wolf. Lady Smallwood expresses a wish to keep Arya with her, but admits that with so few men to defend her walls, it wouldn't be safe. By the time Arya is ready, supper is being served in the hall. Gendry, seeing her, laughs so hard, making wine come out of his nose, only stopping when Harwin whacks him on the ear. After they eat, Greenbeard quietly asks Lady Smallwood if she has any news of Beric or Thoros. Lady Smallwood informs them that she has seen them recently and suggests Stony Step or the Three Penny Wood. She adds that less welcome visitors recently came by, wolves at her gates, searching for Jaime Lannister. Tom stops his playing, shocked to learn the Kingslayer is on the loose. Arya, curious, asks who the men were, and Lady Smallwood recalls they wore black cloaks with a white sun, a sigil Arya recognizes as Lord Karstark's, one of Robb's allies. Arya wonders if they might still be nearby and considers the chance of slipping away to join them. Lem asks how Jaime managed to escape, and Lady Smallwood replies that the men claimed Lady Catelyn set him free, a story she finds unbelievable. Tom is so shocked he snaps a string on his instrument. Arya, equally stunned, tells herself it can't be true. Harwin, noticing Arya, insists the conversation isn't suited for her, and the outlaws agree, urging her to leave. Frustrated, Arya stomps off. Night has settled over Acorn Hall, though she promised Harwin not to try escaping. She feels annoyed by what she sees as lies about her mother. Gendry finds her outside and suggests they check out the smithy while they wait. As Arya and Gendry pass the kennels, Gendry asks if Thoros is the same Red Priest who lived at King's Landing, a shaved-headed fat man. Arya thinks so. Gendry remembers Thoros visiting his forge where his master would scold Thoros about his flaming swords. Gendry recalls his master describing Thoros as able to outdrink even King Robert. He adds that Thoros was well liked by Robert for his love of feast and tourneys, and that he was brave, leading the charge at Pike with his flaming sword, setting Ironmen ablaze with each swing. Arya expresses a wish for a flaming sword. Gendry explains that it's just an illusion, with the wildfire ruining the blade each time. He recalls how his master, Mott, had him prepared to make his first longsword before Yoren took him for the Night's Watch. Arya suggests he could still make swords for her brother Robb when they reach Riverrun. Gendry pauses, noting that she looks like a proper little girl now. Arya retorts that she looks like an oak tree with the acorns on her dress. Gendry remarks that she even smells nice, which leads to a playful shoving. Arya tries to run, but Gendry catches her arm, and they tumble across the floor in a rough play fight. Gendry's strength matches Arya's speed, and as he catches her wrist to tickle her, she knees him, breaking free. Covered in dirt with a torn sleeve, Arya defiantly shouts that she doesn't look nice anymore. When Arya and Gendry return to the hall, they find Tom and Harwin laugh at their disheveled appearance. And Anguy smirks, questioning Arya's highborn status. Lem, however, scolds Gendry, reminding him Arya is a young girl. Arya defends Gendry, admitting she started it, and Harwin agrees, recalling her spirited nature at Winterfell. The next morning, Lady Smallwood provides her with practical clothing, breeches, a tunic, and a jerkin once worn by her late son, who died young. Feeling a pang of guilt, Arya apologizes for tearing the pretty acorn dress, and Lady Smallwood kindly assures her she's pretty as well and tells her to be brave. A Storm of Swords. Daenerys II. Daenerys observes the Plaza of Pride. It is dominated by a towering bronze harpy with a woman's face, gilded hair, and sharp ivory teeth. She recalls the harpy as a symbol of Old Geas, a civilization defeated 5,000 years ago by Valyria's might. She remembers the Jaskari legions crushed, their brick walls destroyed, and their lands scorched by dragonfire, leaving only salt, sulfur, and skulls behind. The gods of Geas and its original people had vanished. According to Ser Jorah, the Astapori are now mere remnants. Even their language is mostly lost, as the slave cities now speak a form of High Valyrian brought by their conquerors. The symbol of the old empire remains, the bronze harpy clutching a thick chain, manacles open at each end. The slaver Kranis Mornaklos, annoyed, ordered his slave girl to inform Daenerys to inspect his troops, implying that even her sunset barbarian eyes should appreciate their excellence. Although Daenerys understands him well, she pretends ignorance, offering the slave girl a vacant smile as if unsure of his meaning. The young slave girl, though she has never left Astapor, speaks the common tongue fluently as she conveys Craney's question. Barely 10 years old, she has the distinct features of nath round face, dusky skin, and golden eyes. Known as the Peaceful People, they are highly sought after as slaves. Daenerys responds indifferently, following Ser Jorah's advice to speak only Dothraki and the common tongue in Astapor. She silently acknowledges Jorah's cleverness before requesting information on the soldiers' training. Craney's nods in response. Daenerys notes with some amusement that his chest is larger than hers. He asserts that everyone knows Unsullied are highly skilled. The slave girl explains that the Unsullied are chosen as children. Their daily regime spans dawn to dusk. The process is brutal, with only a third surviving to completion. Craney says the Unsullied have stood for a full day and night without subsistence and would continue to do so if ordered. Even if 999 were to fall dead on the bricks, the last one would still remain, unmoving until death overtakes him. Arstan Whitebeard, unimpressed by the display, calls it madness rather than courage. He had been reluctant to come to Astapor and disapproves of purchasing a slave army. Daenerys values his perspective. While Ser Jorah remains aboard Balerion to guard her people and dragons, Cranes, upon hearing Arstan's comment translated, admits others may surpass the Unsullied in strength, speed, or size, but none can rival their obedience anywhere across the seas. Disregarding their conversation, Daenerys moves along the line of slave soldiers to observe them. She notices their diverse origins: Dothraki, Lezaren, Carthene, Summer Islanders, and even the amber skin and red-black hair of the Jaskari, known as the Harpy Sons. The sight of the Jaskari selling their own people doesn't surprise her. It reminds her of how the Dothraki do the same when rival Khalasars are defeated. Cranes demonstrates Unsullied's courage by cutting off the nipple of one. Cranes then turns to Daenerys, pointing out that the Unsullied feel no pain. Daenerys questions how the Unsullied feel no pain. Cranes explains that from the day they are cut, they drink a wine of courage, a blend of nightshade, and other secret ingredients. This numbs their senses over time, making them fearless and immune to torture. Daenerys learns each Unsullied is given a new name every day. When Arstan dismisses this, Cranes coldly replies that those who fail to remember are culled in training, alongside those who cannot perform acts of obedience, such as killing an infant. Daenerys hides her reaction until the translation is complete. She then asks whose infants the Unsullied are ordered to kill. Cranes explains that to earn their spiked caps, each Unsullied must go to the slave market with a silver coin, choose a crying newborn, and kill it in front of its mother, ensuring all traces of weakness are erased. Upon hearing Daenerys' reaction, Cranes laughs, mocking her sensitivity and clarifying that the silver coin is for the child's owner, not the mother, as the Unsullied are forbidden to steal. He then describes another trial. Each Unsullied is given a puppy upon being cut, and after a year, they must strangle it. Any who fail are killed and fed to the remaining dogs, reinforcing obedience and strength. As Arstan listens, he finally averts his gaze from Cranes in silent disgust. Out of question, Daenerys turns to Arstan, seeking his opinion. Arstan responds that slavery has been outlawed in Westeros for thousands of years, and leading a slave army, he warns, would cause many honorable men to oppose her, even if she is a Targaryen. Daenerys insists that she still requires an army. Arstan reassures her that when the time comes, many in Westeros will rally to her banner, as her brother Rhaegar is remembered with affection. Arstan advises Daenerys to rely on Magister Illyroy for protection while her dragons mature. He suggests that Illyroy could send covert envoys to the High Lords of Westeros to gauge their support for her claim. Daenerys questions the loyalty of the High Lords, recalling how they abandoned her father to the Kingslayer and swore allegiance to Robert. Arstan suggests that, despite kneeling, some may still long for the return of the dragons. Skeptical, Daenerys reflects on the uncertainty of the word may, then informs Cranes that she needs time to consider her decision. Cranes, unfazed, urges her to decide quickly, claiming there are other buyers, including a Corsair king who recently expressed interest in purchasing all the Unsullied. This might be Euron Greyjoy. The slave girl clarifies that the Corsair only wanted 100, earning a lash poke as Cranes insisted the Corsair will buy them all. Cranes mockingly offers to guide Daenerys through the city and implies he would serve her in other ways if she proves to be as much of a woman as she claims. The slave girl politely translates Cranes' offer. Daenerys forces a polite smile and responds through the translator. She must return to her ship. Taking Arstan Whitebeard's arm, she allows him to guide her back across the plaza to her litter. Aggo and Jogo walk alongside her. Daenerys enters her litter and keeps the curtains open as they move, appreciating any small breeze in the sweltering city of red brick. Jogo rides ahead. Daenerys notes that Astapor, though ancient, is less populated than other cities like Karth. Arstan urges Daenerys to leave this very night. Daenerys wishes she could, but insists she needs an army, as Ser Jorah advised. Arstan reminds her that Jorah was once a slaver too, and suggests she instead hire sellswords from Pentos, Mia, or Tyrosh, as they are not bound by chains. Daenerys, recalling her brother's humiliations in the Free Cities, refuses to beg. Arstan replies that arriving as a beggar is better than coming as a slaver. Daenerys responds sharply, reminding Arstan that he talks like someone who has never been either. She recounts how her brother sold her to Khal Drogo for the promise of a golden crown, a transaction that could have ended very differently had Drogo been another man. She assures Arstan she hasn't forgotten the fear she felt that time. Whitebeard bows his head, apologizing. Daenerys, calming, assures him that only lies offend her, not honest counsel. Whitebeard smiles and agrees to remember. She observes that Whitebeard has a kind face and a quiet strength, puzzled by Ser Jorah's distrust of him. She wonders if Jorah might be jealous that she has found another confidant. Her mind drifts back to the night aboard Balerion when Jorah, uninvited, kissed her. She reflects that he was much older, of a low birth, and more importantly, had acted without her consent, something no honorable knight would do to a queen. Since then, she has avoided being alone with him, keeping her handmaids or blood riders nearby, sensing his desire to kiss her again from the way he looks at her. Daenerys feels uncertain about her desires, but Jorah's kiss has awakened something that has been dormant since Khal Drogo's death. Lying alone, she sometimes imagines a man beside her, finding the thought unexpectedly thrilling. In her dreams, her lover is young and handsome, his face always a shifting shadow, yet it is never Jorah she envisions. One night, restless and unable to sleep, Daenerys touches herself quietly, trying not to disturb Irri beside her. As she reaches for relief, her dragons stir, and one lets out a loud cry, waking Irri, who notices her struggle. Without a word, Irri places a comforting hand on Daenerys, easing her until Daenerys finds release. Once it's over, Irri simply returns to her place and goes back to sleep, saying nothing. The next day, Daenerys reflects, feeling as though the previous night were a dream. She considers whether Ser Jorah's kiss had anything to do with her resurfaced feelings, but reminds herself that her true desire is for Drogo. She had thought her longing died with Drogo in the Red Waste, yet Jorah's kiss reawakened it. Near the bay, Aggo helps Daenerys down from her litter, where she sees Strong Bell was. She walks up the plank onto the Balerion. Jorah awaits Daenerys. As they walk, he asks how many men are for sale. Daenerys snaps that Astapor sells eunuchs, not men who kill infants and choke their own puppies. Surprised by her fury, Jorah tries to explain the Unsullied's training, but Daenerys slaps him. Jorah touches his cheek, apologizing if he has displeased her. She tells Jorah he has greatly disappointed her, adding a true knight would never have brought her to this wretched place. Accepting her rebuke, Jorah suggests that he inform Captain Grolio to prepare for an evening departure. Daenerys, aware of the eyes on them, Grolio, her blood riders, Jiqui, and the others who paused at the sound of her slap, says she would prefer to sail away immediately. But she knows she cannot. She still needs to find a way to purchase the 8,000 Unsullied. With that, she leaves Jorah and goes below deck. Inside the captain's cabin, Daenerys finds her dragons unsettled. Irri tells Daenerys the dragons became unruly while she was away. Later, sensing her mood, Irri offers to comfort Daenerys again, but she declines, reminding Irri that she freed her and does not want her services. Irri insists it's an honor to pleasure her, but Daenerys firmly asks to be left alone to think, turning away as Irri departs. As dust settles over Slaver's Bay, Daenerys returns to the deck. She looks at the beautiful pyramids in moonlight. Jorah approaches Daenerys and explains that winning the Iron Throne requires the same ruthless determination as Aegon the Conqueror, utilizing steel and dragon fire, which will inevitably lead to bloodshed. Daenerys accepts that while she's willing to fight her enemies, but does not want to be complicit in the Unsullied's training by purchasing them. Jorah counters by sharing his experience witnessing the aftermath of war in King's Landing, where unchecked soldiers committed numerous atrocities. He argues that the Unsullied, unlike regular soldiers, only commit violence under direct orders. Daenerys observes Astapor's crumbling walls and asks why the Dothraki haven't sacked such a vulnerable city. Jorah provides the first reason. Any invader must reckon with facing the Unsullied, Astapor's elite troops, who would be fully mobilized by the slavers for the city's defense. He reminds her of the Dothraki's historic loss to the Unsullied at Cahor. Intrigued, Daenerys asks for the second reason, so Jorah questions who would attack Astapor, listing reasons why neighboring regions like Meereen, Yunkai, and Lazar wouldn't pose a threat. He also notes the geographical barriers surrounding Astapor. Daenerys concedes this, but highlights the Dothraki Sea is home to many cows who revel in sacking cities. Jorah responds by discussing the impracticality of the Dothraki carrying off slaves without a network of slavers to sell them to, emphasizing that places like Valyria and Karth are no longer viable destinations. He explains that cities like Astapor avoid conflict by bribing the Dothraki with feasts and gifts and buying their slaves. Daenerys contemplates what Rhaegar Targaryen might do in her place, but Jorah tells her Rhaegar fought honorably and Rhaegar died. A Storm of Swords, Chapter 24. Bran II. From the dense autumn-coloured wolfswood, Bran, Meera, Jojen, and Hodor now walk deep into the monstrous terrain. Thoughts of Osha stir Bran's imagination of her and Rickon safe in White Harbour, enjoying feasts or warming by the Great John's hearth. Meanwhile, Bran endures endless chilly days, journeying across mountain slopes on Hodor's back. Meera expresses her frustration over the constant up and down climbs. Bran reminds her that she had spoken fondly of them the day before, and she admits that she's true. Bran, puzzled, insists that love and hate are opposites. Jojen, however, suggests that opposites can coexist, explaining that like ice that burns, love and hate can mate. This is the song of Ice and Fire. Bran frequently laments that if they had taken the King's Road, they might have already reached the wall, but would have been seen. Bran admires Meera for catching trout for them. Additionally, Summer contributes to their provisions by hunting each night. Now in the mountains, the conditions worsen with less streams and less game available. Despite the challenges, Jojen insists on avoiding roads, arguing that roads bring travelers who could recognize them and spread stories about the disabled boy, his towering companion, and the wolf that travels with them. Their journey through the mountains is marked by diverse weather, rain, wind, and storms. Bran informs Meera that the Umbers are to their east, the Wolves to the west along the Bay of Ice, and the Knots, Littles, Norries, and Flints in the high places, who Stannis will recruit in A Dance with Dragons. Jojen wonders if the mountain folk are aware of their presence. Bran, through Summer, confirms that they have been seen, but reassures that they will be left alone as long as they don't disturb the local livestock. But one night, a sudden burst of freezing rain forced them to seek shelter. Summer led them to a shallow cave. As Hodor entered, Bran noticed an orange glow of fire deep within. A Mountain Clan man inside invited them to join him. The stranger in the cave shared food and ale with them, but remained anonymous, never offering his name or inquiring about theirs. Bran deduced he might be a little, observing a pine cone-shaped clasp on his cloak and matching emblems on his shield. While whittling a stick with his knife, the little reminisced about the days when the Starks ruled Winterfell. He noted that back then, a young woman could safely walk the King's Road alone, and travelers were welcomed with hospitality across various inns and strongholds. Dangers now lurk in the Wolfswood, and ominous men known for flaying their captives patrol the King's Road, questioning any strangers they encounter. At this, the Reeds exchanged concerned glances, with Jojen inquiring about the mention of flayed men. The Little spoke gravely about the flayed men, or the Bastards' boys, noting that their once dead leader, Ramsay Bolton, was now active again, and that there was a reward for wolfskins and possibly even information on certain revived figures, glancing meaningfully at Bran and Summer. He then expressed reluctance about heading to the Wall, recounting how the old bear lost his men in the haunted woods, with only silent ravens returning. He reflected on better times under Stark rule, but as the old Stark died, the younger one went south to play the Game of Thrones, leaving a wolfless north. Jojen solemnly promises that the wolves will return. Upon waking the following day, they found the fire extinguished and the Little absent, yet he had left a sausage and 12 oatcakes neatly tucked in a green and white cloth for them. Bran consoles himself with thoughts of the Starks reclaiming Winterfell and his intent to reward the Littles lavishly for their goodness. As they continue their journey, Bran agrees with Hodor after he repeats his own name, prompting Jojen to comment that Hodor seems to enjoy hearing it spoken. Bran clarifies that Hodor isn't his real name, but merely a word he often utters. His actual name is Walder, as Old Nan, his distinct relative, had informed him. The mention of Old Nan saddens Bran, leading him to wonder if she was harmed during the siege of Winterfell. He recalls not seeing any female casualties and questions whether Theon, who knew Old Nan as well, could have been involved in harming someone who was only known for sharing stories. Mira notes that it was the Ironman who did most of the killing, not Theon. She advises Bran to cherish Old Nan's stories and the sound of her voice. She suggests that by remembering them, Bran keeps a part of her alive within himself. We learn from Jojen that many warriors, including Andals, Ironman, and Freys, ventured to conquer Greywater but never returned. They would enter the Neck and eventually sink into the bogs under the weight of their armor, drowning in their conquests. The idea of night submerged and lost in the bogs send a chill through Bran, but he admits he enjoys the thrill of such eerie tales. Mira then begins a story about a mysterious figure known as the Knight of the Laughing Tree, who appeared during the year of the false spring and whom she suspected was a Crannogman. Jojen remarks that Bran might already know the story Mira is about to tell, but Bran insists on hearing it. Mira hesitates but soon starts to recount the tale of a young, adventurous lad from the Neck. This boy, small yet fierce and wise, chose to venture from his familiar swampy home to discover the mystical Isle of Faces. Bran questions the feasibility of visiting the Isle of Faces, pointing out that it's known as the domain of the mysterious Green Men. The man navigated his boat under cover of night beneath the Twins to avoid detection by the Freys. Upon reaching the Trident, he carried his boat over land until he finally arrived at the God's Eye and the Isle of Faces. He spent the entire winter there, but as he returned home, he noticed a massive castle. Bran instantly recognizes it as Harrenhal. Mira reveals there was a tourney with the Dragon Knight, his son, and many other notable lords. This is the tourney of Harrenhal with King Aerys II Targaryen, Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, Lyanna Stark, Brandon, Eddard, and Benjen, as well as Robert Baratheon, Jaime Lannister, Oberyn Martell, and Jon Connington. Mira reveals the Crannogman was suddenly attacked by 3 squires. A young woman known as the She-Wolf steps in, announcing that the Crannogman is under her father's protection, which ceases the squire's harassment. She then cared for his injuries where he met her brothers, the wild wolf who led them, the quiet one, and the youngest pup. That evening, a feast was held and the She-Wolf insisted that the Crannogman attend. At the feast, the Dragon Prince performed a melancholic song that moved the wolf-maid to tears, prompting playful teasing from her brother, whom she promptly doused with wine. A Storm Lord humorously competed in a drinking game. Ashara Dane danced with her brother, Oberyn Martell, Jon Connington, before Brandon convinced Ashara to dance with his shy brother, Eddard. who Catelyn thinks is Jon Snow's mother. According to Sir Barristan Selmy, Ashara was dishonoured by a man at Harrenhal. During the celebration, the Kragenmen spotted the 3 squires who had previously attacked him. One was a Frey. The next day, a mysterious knight joined the tourney. Bran recalls the Dragon Knight and Barristan the Bold, who had both previously completed as Mystery Knights, speculating that the Mystery Knight might have been the Kragenmen. Meera explains that the Mystery Knight was notably short and wore mismatched armor. His shield was emblazoned with the image of a laughing heart tree. The Knight of the Laughing Tree successfully unseated the 3 knights who attacked the Kragenmen. The crowd, not fond of these knights, heartily cheered for the new champion. After their defeat, when these knights sought to ransom their gear, the Mystery Knight called for them to teach their squires honor instead as payment, which they did. Later, Aerys called for the mysterious knight to be unmasked. However, the next day, the Knight of the Laughing Tree was nowhere to be found. Despite the king's anger and the Dragon Prince's efforts to locate him, only the knight's uniquely painted shield was discovered, left hanging in a tree. It is theorized Rhaegar did find the Knight of the Laughing Tree, and it was Lyanna, which is how they met each other before running away together at the start of Robert's rebellion. Meera reveals it was the Dragon Prince who emerged victorious in the tournament. Bran criticizes the story, but Meera hints at a deeper, sadder layer to the story after mentioning that the Wolf Maid indeed became the Queen of Love and Beauty like Bran wanted. Intrigued, Jojen asks Bran if he has heard this tale before. Bran denies having heard it before. Inspired by the Kragenmen's adventures, Bran muses about the magical green men of the Isle of Faces, wondering if they could restore his ability to walk, or even for just one day transform him into a knight. A Storm of Swords, Chapter 25. Davos III. Davos finds himself confined in a shadowy, damp cell beneath Dragonstone. The cell is infested with rats, yet it's warm from the heat of the stone corridors below. Lonely in the darkness, Davos craves conversation, often speaking to the guards who bring his food or empty his pail. Knowing they would ignore any pleas for release, he instead asks them about the war, the king's health, and news of his son Devon, Princess Shireen, and Salador Saan. Despite his attempts, the guards remain silent. Davos remembers that Lord Sunglass and Sir Hubert Rampton's sons had also been imprisoned at Dragonstone, only to be burned on a pyre in the end. Reflecting bitterly, he wishes he had given himself to the sea or let the sail pass him by on his rock. He would have preferred to feed the crabs than to face the fire. As Davos finishes his meal, an odd warmth washes over him, and he looks up to see Melisandre, standing beyond the bars. With forced composure, he listens as she calmly inquires about his well-being and any needs. Davos responds that he longs for his king and his son, then questions whether her purpose is to burn him. Melisandre remarks on the cell's darkness and foulness and gestures towards the torch as his only light, describing it as a gift from R'hllor. She then suggests extinguishing it. Alarmed, Davos quickly asks her to let it remain, unable to imagine the pitch-black solitude with only the rats. She smiles, observing his newfound reliance on the fire. Melisandre likens herself to the torch, describing both of them as tools of R'hllor with the sole purpose of keeping darkness at bay, and questions if Davos believes in this purpose. Davos, too honest to deceive her, responds that he does not. He views her as a source of darkness, recalling how he witnessed her give birth beneath Storm's End. In response, Melisandre dismisses his fear, explaining that shadows only exist through light, though she cannot risk creating another as the king's energy is too drained. However, she hints that another man with a stronger flame could be suitable. She suggests that Davos could serve the king's cause by joining her in her chambers, offering him unmatched pleasure in exchange for his life force to create something for the cause. Horrified, Davos withdraws, firmly rejecting both her and her god, wishing instead for the protection of the Seven. When Davos asks what she wants him to see, Melisandre describes the world as a place of constant opposites: light and dark, ice and fire, hate and love, winter and summer, good and evil, all locked in perpetual struggle. She speaks of an endless conflict between these forces, referring to it as the war. Davos, both curious and cautious, presses her to explain further. Melisandre emphasizes that the true conflict is a timeless war between two forces. She explains that her journey was not to support another king, but to fight in this ultimate battle where everyone must choose a side. On one side is R'hllor, the Lord of Light. On the other, the Great Other, the Lord of Darkness. She insists that the choice is not about supporting Baratheon or Lannister, Greyjoy or Stark, but a battle between light and darkness. Reaching through the bars to touch his chest, she probes for his inner truth. Davos, however, admits his heart is filled with doubts. Melisandre sighs, acknowledging Davos's honesty. Stepping back from the cell, she asks why Davos intended to kill her. Davos replies that he will reveal his reason if she tells him who betrayed him, suspecting it was San, yet hoping it was not. Melisandre, however, explains that no one betrayed him. She had seen his intentions in her flames. Challenging her powers, Davos questions why. If she can see the future, they suffered defeat at Blackwater. She clarifies that those fires were not hers. Had she been there, the battle's outcome would have been different. She blames the failure on the king's pride and the unbelievers around him, stating that he has since learned from the punishment he endured. Davos, angered, wonders if his sons' lives were sacrificed merely to teach the king a lesson. Melisandre explains that Stannis is not just a king, but the chosen warrior of fire, destined to lead the battle against darkness. She has seen this vision in the flames. Melisandre recounts an ancient prophecy declaring that when the Red Star bled and darkness gathered, Azor Ahai would be reborn in smoke and salt to rouse dragons from stone. She believes Stannis fulfills this prophecy, as Dragonstone is the place of smoke and salt, and the Red Star has already passed. She declares that he will serve R'hllor again despite his doubts. Finally, Melisandre tells him she will leave him to reflect on her words, and in a gesture of R'hllor's mercy, she leaves the torch burning. Melisandre leaves with only the torchlight remaining. Davos reflects on the undeniable power of her god, remembering the shadow that emerged from Melisandre and her unsettling knowledge of his intent. He is relieved that Salladhor Saan hadn't betrayed him, yet disturbed by her ability to see his secrets through flames. Days later, Alistair Florent is dragged into the cells, pleading to be released and demanding to see Queen Selyse. As the guards walk away, Alistair declares himself the king's hand. Alistair is surprised to see Davos and apologizes for his appearance. Unaware of Davos's grief, Alistair laments the loss of his fine clothes, now likely worn by some servant in King's Landing, and remarks on the horrors of war. Davos quietly replies that he lost his ship, all his men, and 4 of his sons. Alistair offers a blessing and reflects on his son's safety at Brightwater and mourns the loss of his nephew, Sir Ermy on the Fury. Davos, remembering Sir Ermy's reckless lead up the Blackwater, notes that his own son Marek served as Oar-Master on the Fury. Seeing Alistair's defeated spirit, Davos recalls Melisandre's words about sparks igniting flames and assures him that Stannis will never yield. Lord Alistair sinks back to the floor, declaring that Stannis will never sit on the Iron Throne. He considers it a harsh truth, but an undeniable one. With Stannis' fleet destroyed and many former supporters either aligning with Joffrey or dead, Alistair sees their cause as doomed. He lists the defeated Narrow Sea Lords. Lord Celtigar submitted, Manfred Valyrian perished at sea, Lord Sunglass was sacrificed by Melisandre, and young feeble Lord Bar Emmon provides minimal aid. House Florent is Stannis' last significant support, while formidable houses like Highgarden, Sunspear, Castle Rock, and the Stormlord stand against them. Alistair insists his intent was merely to pursue peace, wondering bitterly how it could be considered treason. Davos, frowning, asks what Alistair has done. Alistair insists his loyalty to Stannis as his hand and his familial ties through his niece, the Queen. He explains that he drafted a letter arranging for Salladhor Saan to have it delivered to King's Landing, specifically to Tywin Lannister. Believing Tywin to be reasonable, Alistair had proposed fair terms. When Davos presses for details, Alistair reveals the terms. Stannis would relinquish his claim to the Iron Throne and withdraw his accusations of Joffrey's illegitimacy in exchange for being reinstated as Lord of Dragonstone and Storm's End. Alistair sought the return of Brightwater Keep and offered a marriage between Shireen and Joffrey's younger brother Tommen to secure the alliance. He believes these terms are the best they could hope for, urging Davos to see sense in them. Davos acknowledges Alistair's plan, recognizing that a marriage between Shireen and Tommen would eventually hand control of Dragonstone and Storm's End to the Lannisters, with Shireen held as a hostage to restrain Stannis. He then asks how Stannis responded to the proposal. Alistair, frustrated by Stannis' constant reliance on Melisandre, calls the king's obsession with raising a stone dragon madness. He insists his approach is safer by saying, "My way was better, surer, and Stannis gave me his seal. He gave me leave to rule. The hand speaks with the king's voice." Not in this. Davos was no courtier, and he did not even try to blunt his words. It is not in Stannis to yield, so long as he knows his claim is just. No more than he can unsay his words against Joffrey, when he believes them true. As for the marriage, Tommen was born of the same incest as Joffrey, and his grace would sooner see Shireen dead than wed to such. A vein throbbed in Florent's forehead. "He has no choice." "You are wrong, my lord. He can choose to die a king." "And us with him? Is that what you desire, Onion Knight?" "No, but I am the king's man, and I will make no peace without his leave." Lord Alistair stared at him helplessly, and then began to weep. A Storm of Swords, Jon III. On the clear moonless night before they were to cross the wall, Jon informs the Thenns guarding the cave entrance that he plans to climb the hill in search of Ghost, and they independently allow him to proceed. Looking up at the stars, Ygritte believes that certain alignments of the stars create favorable moments for taking a woman, relating it to the evening Jon had abducted her, although he clarifies he didn't intend to kidnap her and hadn't even realized she was female at first. He finds Ygritte's unyielding nature reminiscent of Arya, stirring an unsettling reflection on his sense of self. He wonders if Arya still counts as his sister, considering his position as Eddard Stark's illegitimate son. Having relinquished his identity as a Stark, Jon realizes he's lost his place in Winterfell, much like Theon Greyjoy. As expected, Ghost waits at the hilltop. Jon tells Ghost that tomorrow they'll cross the wall, though he has no way to bring him along. Accepting their need to part, he asks if Ghost understands. Ghost nuzzles Jon's neck. Though the wildlings call Jon a warg, he knows he lacks the skill to truly become one. He recalls a time he dreamt through Ghost's eyes, seeing Mance Rayder's camp, but that was it. Jon tells Ghost to follow the ice eastward to Castle Black, hoping his arrival will warn the men there. With no way to send a written message, Jon promises they'll reunite at Castle Black, but for now they must go their separate ways. The direwolf breaks free from Jon's hold, ears perked, and abruptly dashes off. Jon questions if Ghost is truly heading to Castle Black or simply chasing after prey. Jon looks at the wall and, judging by the rough, hilly terrain, he thinks they must be somewhere between the Shadow Tower and Castle Black. Jon realizes he's become no different from the Wildling Raiders. Regret fills him for not trying to kill Mance Rayder at the Fist, even if it had cost him his life, knowing that's what Qhorin Halfhand would have done. But he hesitated, and the moment slipped away. The morning after missing his chance, he sets off with Styr, Garl, and a company of over 100 Thenns and Raiders, with Jarl keeping a close eye on him. Ygritte remained constantly by his side, making any chance to escape impossible. Mance Rayder's mocking words about them being in love linger bitterly in his mind. When Ygritte first slipped into his bed, he convinced himself he had no choice. Refusing her would expose him as a traitor. He clings to the belief that he's simply fulfilling the role Halfhand instructed him to play. Jon recalls how his body happily participated, responding to Ygritte's touch and whispered guidance. As she drew him deeper into the experience, thoughts of his vows faded and nothing else mattered beyond being with her. Afterward, Jon tried to remind himself that it was all just a role, a necessary act to gain Ygritte's trust and prove he'd abandoned his vows. He reassured himself that it didn't need to happen again, that he is still a man of the Night's Watch, a son of Eddard Stark, and kept telling himself he did only what was required. Jon reassured himself it was a one-time lapse, finding comfort in knowing even his father had once faltered. But their intimacy continued that night and as well as upon sunrise, drawing the attention of the nearby wildlings, with Jarl jokingly urging them to hurry. Later, Jon felt ashamed, likening himself to a rutting animal and questioning if he's betraying his vows. The inner voice reminding him of his duty fades each night, lost whenever Ygritte touched him, leaving him wondering if his father felt a similar weakness when he stumbled in his own vows. Inside a cave, the wildlings prepare to climb. Mance Rayder had assigned joint command to Jarl and the Magnar. Jon noted early on the Styr, who brought 100 Thenns, resented sharing authority with Jarl, who commanded only a fraction of that number. Mance had once referred to Jarl as Val's pet, Val being the sister of Dalla, Mance's queen, which loosely connected Jarl to the king beyond the wall. Styr often acted as if he alone held command. Yet Jon understands that Jarl will be the one to guide them over the wall. Although young, around 20, Jarl is experienced, with 8 years of raiding and more than a dozen crossings of the wall, including several alongside notorious raiders like Alfin Crowkiller and the Weeper, and more lately leading his own group. The Magnar addresses Jon directly, stating that Jarl has informed him of crows patrolling the heights and demanding every detail Jon knows about these patrols. Jon notes that Styr pointedly directs his question at him, disregarding Jarl's presence nearby. Although Jon feels a strong urge to refuse, he knows that any defiance would mean death for both him and Ygritte. Unwillingly, he describes the patrol setup. Each group includes 4 men, 2 rangers and 2 builders. The builders check for structural weaknesses, while the rangers stay alert for potential threats, and they primarily ride mules. Styr questions the choice of mules, prompting Jon to explain that although slower, mules are more stable in icy terrain, making them well suited for travel along the wall, especially on paths left ungraveled for years. He accepts Jon's explanation and mentions the tale of Arsken Isaac's, a raider who had attempted to tunnel through the wall. Jon recalls how rangers from the Nightford, upon discovering Arsen's tunnel, sealed it behind him with layers of ice and stone, trapping him within the wall forever. As Jon thinks back on the story, he remembers Dolorous Ed's eerie words. If someone pressed their ear flat against the wall, they might still hear Arsen's axe chipping away, eternally digging in the darkness. Styr questions the timing and frequency of the patrols. Jon explains that it varies. Under Lord Commander Corgyle, patrols went out every 3 days between Castle Black and Eastwatch by the Sea, and every 2 days to the Shadow Tower. However, with fewer men now, Lord Commander Mormont adjusts the schedule and number of patrols to keep their movements unpredictable. Occasionally, Mormont even sends a larger force to occupy one of the abandoned castles temporarily, a tactic Jon's uncle had initiated to keep enemies uncertain. Jarl then asks if Stone Door or Greyguard is currently manned. Jon, careful to reveal nothing, states that only Eastwatch, Castle Black, and the Shadow Tower were occupied when he left, and can't speak to recent changes by Bowen Marsh or Sir Denys. Ster asks how many men remain stationed at the castle, and Jon replies with inflated numbers: 500 at Castle Black, 200 at the Shadow Tower, and around 300 at Eastwatch. Jon knows this is a stretch, wishing it were truly that simple. Jarl, however, is unconvinced, suggesting Jon is lying or counting the men lost at the Fist. He warns Jon not to treat him like Mance Rayder and threatens to cut out his tongue if he lies. Jon, maintaining his defiance, insists he isn't a crow and won't tolerate being called a liar, flexing his sword hand in readiness. After a tense moment, the Magnar studies him coldly and finally dismisses him, adding that he'll be summoned again if there are further questions. Bowing his head, Jon turns and leaves, thinking that if all wildlings were like Ster, betraying them would be far simpler. But the Thenns stand apart from other free folk, the Magnar claiming descent from the First Men. Ygritte describes the Thenns as ruthless fighters who view the Magnar as a god, a belief Jon finds plausible. Unlike Jarl, Harma, or Rattleshirt, Ster commands total obedience from his men, likely part of why Mance entrusted him with the mission beyond the wall. Jon moves past the Thenns seated by their cook fires and wonders where Ygritte has gone. He finds her gear next to his, but there's no sign of her. Grigg the goat points him toward the rear of the cabin, mentioning that she took a torch and headed in that direction. Following the path, Jon navigates a dim maze until he hears her laughter. He turns toward the sound, only to reach a dead end at a wall. He eventually finds Ygritte with a torch by a small waterfall cascading into a dark, wide pool. Ygritte tells Jon that these hills are filled with interconnected caves, including a path known as Gorn's Way that supposedly leads beneath the wall. He recognizes the name Gorn, a king beyond the wall, and Ygritte explains that Gorn and his brother Gendul led a force of free folk through the caves thousands of years ago, undetected by the Night's Watch. However, when they emerged, the Starks of Winterfell ambushed them. Jon recalls the story, noting that Jorn killed the king in the north, only to be slain in turn by the king's son, who took up his father's banner. Ygritte adds that the sounds of battle alerted the Watch, who attacked the free folk from behind, trapping Gendul between the northern forces, the Umbers to the east and the Watch to the north, leading to his death. Ygritte corrects Jon, saying Gendul didn't die, but instead fought through the Night's Watch and led his people north with the wolves of Winterfell pursuing them. Without Gorn's knowledge of the caves, Gendul took a wrong path, descending deeper underground until he was lost. His torches eventually went out and his people were never seen again. Ygritte tells Jon that on quiet nights, the cries of their descendants can still be heard, forever searching for an escape. He then asks if the way under the wall was also lost. Ygritte explains that those who search for it sometimes encounter Gendul's descendants, who are always hungry. Smiling, she steps close, whispering that in the dark, flesh is all that's left to eat, as she playfully bites his neck. Jon leans in, breathing in Ygritte's scent and teasing her, comparing her story to old Nan's tales for Bran. Ygritte, taking mock offense, punches him and insists she's not only older, but wiser, reminding him he knows nothing. She pulls away, removing her rabbit skin vest and beginning to undress. When Jon questions her actions, she confidently tells him she's showing him just how old she is, continuing until she stands bare before him. She encourages him to do the same if he wants a good look. Jon, forgetting his vows, realizes he truly desires Ygritte and is struck by her beauty as she stands bare before him. He draws her close, admiring and savoring her presence, expressing his affection for everything about her. She teases him about still being dressed. but any words soon give way to their shared intimacy. Afterward, Ygritte, unusually shy, asks Jon about the intimate thing he did, wondering if it's something Southern lords do with their ladies. Jon admits he doesn't know, but explains he simply wanted to kiss her there, pleased she enjoyed it. When she teases him about being a maid, Jon playfully pinches her and reflects on his past identity as a member of the Night's Watch, realizing how much has changed. When Jon inquires if it was Ygritte's first time as well, she recounts her encounter with a boy at a feast 5 years prior, noting he also had red hair, which she initially thought would bring luck. However, he proved feeble, and when he attempted to steal her again, Longspear thwarted him and chased him off for good. Relieved to hear it wasn't Longspear, Jon's response prompts Ygritte to explain her culture's practices. True men take women from distant lands to strengthen the clan, as relationships with close kin are taboo and believed to produce weak offspring. Ironically, this might be what the White Walkers also do to avoid genetic inbreeding, a similar practice to the wildlings. Ygritte refutes Jon's mention of Craster, who marries his daughters, by stating that Craster is an outsider, a Night's Watch deserter. As she caresses Jon, she shares her initial fears that he would leave her after stealing her. Jon maintains to Ygritte that he didn't steal her. Ygritte counters, recalling how Jon had her at knife point, yet he neither harmed her nor claimed her as she had anticipated. She reminds him of the story of Beowulf the Bard, suggesting she expected him to take her at that moment, but he didn't. As the light from the torch begins to fade, Jon suggests they head back, but Ygritte's not ready to end their moment, pushing him back down, teasingly straddling him and shyly asking if he'd repeat the intimate act he performed earlier. Afterwards, the torch dies out, and Jon feels a pang of guilt, but it's less intense, leaving him questioning why something that feels so profoundly right could be considered wrong. In the complete darkness, they clumsily try to dress in the dark, and when Ygritte accidentally stumbled into the pool, her shout at the cold water prompts laughter from Jon, who soon joins her after she playfully pulls him in. Splashing and wrestling in the water, they find themselves drawn back together for another passionate encounter. Afterward, as they lay close, Ygritte confesses her desire to never leave the cave, hoping to remain there with Jon indefinitely. A Storm of Swords, Daenerys III. In a chamber, Daenerys confirms her decision to acquire all the slaves. While the good masters of Estepor converse in muted tones, detecting their greed even though she can't discern every word. The merchants are each shadowed slaves. Daenerys, aiming to avoid appearing poor, accompanies herself with her own retinue, Ira and Jiqui, Whitebeard, Belwaz, her blood riders and Jorah, whose intense sweat distinctly counters the delicate fragrances surrounding the Astapori. Craney's demands clarification. Daenerys affirms her intent to purchase them all, even those in training who are yet to earn their spikes. They debate the risk of selling all their Unsullied now. Daenerys listens quietly, drinking wine and keeping her expression neutral as the slavers argue. Daenerys declares their verdict. Daenerys can acquire the 8,006 centuries of Unsullied if her finances suffice. She proposes to purchase even the youngest trainees, offering the same rate for them as for the battled seasoned soldiers. The traders initially reject her proposition, even after Daenerys increases her offer to double. They skeptically questions whether she possesses adequate wealth and trading goods to afford all the eunuchs she seeks. Daenerys proposes to trade one of her dragons for all the Unsullied. Beside her, Jiqui inhales sharply in surprise. Craney's exchanges smug looks with his peers. Meanwhile, Whitebeard reacts with horror and disbelief, trembling as he pleads with her on bended knee to win her throne with dragons, not through slavery. Unwavering, Daenerys instructs Ser Jorah to remove Whitebeard from his presumption. After Whitebeard is escorted away, Daenerys asks the slave girl to apologize to the good masters for the disruption and indicates she is waiting for their decision. Daenerys discerns the answer in the eager gleams and barely concealed smiles of the good masters. Astapor might have legions of eunuchs and countless boys destined to become unsullied, yet the world beholds only 3 living dragons. The Jaskari's desire for dragons is overwhelming. Historically, Old Gis clashed with Valyria 5 times, each time suffering defeat because Valyria wielded dragons while Gis did not. During the negotiation, Grazdan demands the largest and healthiest dragon. Daenerys agrees to exchange Drogon. Both parties seal the deal. As the agreement wraps up, Rhaenys remarks that the Unsullied will quickly pick up Daenerys' language, but she'll need a translator until then. He offers the slave girl as a gift, marking a successful negotiation. Daenerys accepts, and the slave girl translates the proceedings, masking any personal reactions. As Daenerys moves past Arstan Whitebeard on the terrace, he follows silently, the sound of his staff tapping on the red bricks behind her. Daenerys acknowledges his anger. In the Plaza of Pride, Daenerys confronts Whitebeard. She asserts her openness to his advice in private, but instructs him never to challenge her publicly. Whitebeard, clearly distressed, agrees. Daenerys reaffirms her authority, reminding him that she is no longer a child but a queen. Whitebeard cautions her, suggesting that the Astapori may have deceived her, emphasizing that a dragon's value surpasses any army, as history has shown with Aegon's conquest 300 years prior. Daenerys redirects her attention to the girl, identifying herself as Missandei. Without hesitation, Daenerys liberates Missandei from slavery, inviting her to join her in the carriage. Offering her a position as a handmaid and translator, similar to her role for Rhaenys. Missandei is given the freedom to leave if she wishes to reunite with her family, but she elects to stay, citing she has nowhere else to go and is pleased to serve her. Daenerys warns Missandei that accompanying her would be fraught with risks, but Missandei responds with Vala Maguris, all men must die. Daenerys inquires about the obedience of the Unsullied. Missandei confirms their unwavering obedience. Daenerys then contemplates the future of the Unsullied after her conquests are over, pondering what purpose they could serve when no longer needed for battle. Missandei suggests that the Unsullied can serve as guards or watchmen. Daenerys, however, asks if the Unsullied might be turned against her. Missandei explains that they would follow any command, even suggesting that Daenerys could command them to end their own lives once they are no longer needed. Daenerys is taken aback by the suggestion and probes Missandei about such a command. Struggling with her response, Missandei reveals that 3 of the Unsullied were once her brothers. Daenerys reflects on this, then settles back, preparing to return to her ship, Balerion, and to Drogon. That night, Daenerys can't sleep and moves to the deck for fresh air. There, Ser Jorah advises her to rest for the upcoming challenging day. Ignoring his advice, Daenerys reflects on a painful memory of Yura, a Lysarian girl she had protected from harm only to be later betrayed after Khal Drogo's death and the failure of kings to protect their people. Jorah offers no rebuttal, only a comforting touch to her hair, which brings her some solace. That night, Daenerys dreams she is Rhaegar on his way to the Trident, but she rides a dragon instead of a horse. In her dream, she defeats an ice-armored host by melting them with dragon fire, which turns the Trident into a raging river. She feels like she is fulfilling her destiny, but wakes suddenly in the darkness of her cabin. She detects another presence in her cabin. When she calls out for her handsmaid or Jorah, a woman's voice tells her everyone is asleep, including the dragons. Daenerys senses a presence looming over her. Feeling uneasy, she challenges the figure, asking what it wants from her. A mysterious voice responds with guidance, telling Daenerys to move north, she must first travel south. To get to the west, she must journey east. To go forward, she must go back. And to find the light, she must pass through darkness. Thinking the voice is Quaithe, Daenerys leaps from the bed and flings open the door. The cabin fills with lantern light, rousing Irri and Jiqui. Viserion awakens, lighting up the cabin with a flame, yet there's no sign of the mysterious woman. Concerned, Jiqui asks if Daenerys is all right. Daenerys dismisses the nightmare encounter as just a dream and urges herself and her handmaids to try sleeping again. The next morning, she enters Astapor riding her horse with Irri and Jiqui. with Iri and Jiqui, Ago, Strong Belwas, Missandei, Jorah, Hikaru, Jorgi, and Grolio. As Daenerys leads her ragged group, she thinks of having a banner made, flowing black silk featuring the Targaryen red three-headed dragon breathing golden flames, like one Rhaegar might have borne. Daenerys has purchased too many Unsullied for them to fit in the Plaza of Pride with its large bronze harpy. Instead, they were assembled in the Plaza of Punishment, near Astapor's main gate. This location was chosen so the Unsullied could be marched out of the city as soon as Daenerys takes command. Daenerys turns her silver around and trots towards the center of the plaza to inspect the army she has purchased. 8,600 fully trained soldiers wearing spiked bronze caps, with an additional 5,000 less experienced fighters behind them. She notices that the ranks furthest back are filled with mere boys, yet they stand as upright and motionless as the seasoned warriors in front of them. Cranes and his associates are there to meet Daenerys, with other Astapori nobles nearby, drinking wine while slavers serve trays of food. As the payment is being made, Cranes offers Daenerys some final advice on managing her new troops, suggesting that since the Unsullied are still inexperienced, it would be wise for Daenerys to engage them in battle soon. He proposes that she could attack the small cities on her route to Westeros. Cranes assures her that any loot would be hers alone, as Unsullied do not desire wealth. He also advises that any captives could be sent back to Astapor, where he promises to purchase the healthy ones at a fair price, hinting that these captives might one day become Unsullied themselves, benefiting everyone involved. Accompanied by Ser Jorah and Belwas, Daenerys approaches the litter where Drogon and his brothers sun themselves. Jiqui releases one end of Drogon's chain and hands it to Daenerys. With a pull, Drogon lifts his head, hissing, and spreads his wings of night and scarlet. Cranes grins widely as Drogon's shadow envelops him. Daenerys gives Drogon's chain to the slaver, who in return presents her with a whip. Its handle, made of black dragon bone inlaid with gold, has 9 thin leather lashes and a golden pommel with a woman's head. Cranes calls it the Harpy's Fingers. Turning the whip in her hand, Daenerys asks if the exchange is complete. Cranes confirms and pulls sharply on the chain, wanting Drogon to come down. With her heart pounding, Daenerys rides her horse and wonders if her brother Rhaegar had felt the same fear before facing the usurper at the Trident. Standing in her stirrups, she raises the Harpy's fingers high for the Unsullied to see, shouting that they now belong to her. Galloping along the front rank, she proclaims they are the dragons, bought and paid for. Old Grazdin turns sharply, startled to hear her speak Valyrian, while the other slavers crowd around Cranes and Drogon, struggling to control the dragon. Daenerys, imagining her own crossing of the Trident, wheels her horse around as the Blood Riders close in around her. Observing Cranes struggling with Drogon, she remarks that a dragon cannot be enslaved. She strikes him across the face with the whip, tearing his skin as blood streams down his beard. Without hesitation, Daenerys calls to Drogon, commanding Dracarys with all her fear gone. Drogon unfurls his wings and releases a dark flame that engulfs Cranes. His eyes melt and his hair and beard catch fire, forming a fiery crown above his head. The smell of charred flesh fills the air, and his scream overwhelms every other sound. The Plaza of Punishment erupts into chaos and bloodshed. The good masters scream and scramble, tripping over their fringed tokars in a frantic attempt to escape. Iri and Jiqui unleash Viserion and Rhaegal, sending all 3 dragons into the sky. As Daenerys turns to observe, she sees a third of Astapor's demon-torn soldiers struggling to control their terrified mounts. Jogo's whip, Hikaru's arak, and Ogo's notches arrows protect Daenerys, while strong Belwas wields his arak with deadly skill. Old Grazdin calls desperately for the Unsullied to defend the slavers as Hikaru's arrow pierces his mouth. But the Unsullied remain still, not even glancing down as Old Grazdin dies. Daenerys realizes her prayer has been answered. Riding before them, Daenerys commands the Unsullied to kill the slavers and soldiers, to spare children under 12, and to free every slave. Raising the harpy's fingers, she then casts the whip aside, declaring freedom and Dracarys. The Unsullied echoes her cry as Slaver scatters, pleading in terror, while spears and dragonfire fill the air.